My best friend called to tell me he's getting married, and I realized he stopped being my best friend years ago. When my phone lit up with his name, I froze for a second. I hadn't seen that name pop up in a long time. Maybe 3 years? 4? It was like seeing a ghost from a past life. "Hey man," he said, his voice as cheerful as I remembered. "You got a minute?" I said yeah. Though I hesitated, I was standing in my kitchen, half distracted by the smell of overcooked eggs and the hum of the fridge. But his voice, familiar and distant all at once, pulled me right back to another version of my life. Then he said it. "I'm getting married." I congratulated him, of course. What else do you say to something like that? I laughed, told him I was happy for him, that she must be amazing. He chuckled, said, "You'd like her, man. She reminds me a bit of how you used to be, always keeping me grounded." That line hit harder than I expected. How I used to be. We chatted for maybe 10 minutes. Mostly surface stuff. Work, where he's living now. Little updates about mutual friends. I could hear the excitement in his voice, the kind that only comes from new beginnings. But underneath it, there was this hollow space, like we were two people playing catch from opposite sides of a canyon. After he hung up, I just stood there, phone still in my hand, staring at my reflection in the dark microwave door. That was my best friend once. We'd done everything together, and somehow I didn't even know he'd been dating someone seriously, let alone engaged. It made me think about when exactly things changed. Back in high school, we were inseparable. He, let's call him Eric, was the wild one. He'd convince me to skip class to drive out to the lake, or sneak into old abandoned houses just for the thrill of it. I was the planner, the one making sure we didn't get caught or hurt. Together, we balanced each other out. After graduation, I went to college out of state. Eric stayed behind, working construction with his uncle. We promised to stay close, and for a while, we did. Late-night calls, weekend visits, inside jokes that made no sense to anyone else. Then life started pulling at us in quiet ways. The first big crack was when I couldn't make it back home for his 21st birthday. Finals week. No money, no time. He joked about it, but I could tell he was disappointed. After that, we talked less. I'd send a text. He'd reply a few days later. He'd call. I'd be too busy. It was nobody's fault. It just happened. Then came the first time he didn't tell me something big. I found out through mutual friends that he'd moved in with a girl. Her name was Megan. And from what I heard, they'd been serious for a while. I didn't even know he was seeing anyone. When I asked, he laughed and said, "It wasn't a big deal until it was." That stung. I tried reaching out more after that. But every conversation felt like catching up with an old coworker rather than a brother. He had new friends, a new routine. I wasn't mad. I just didn't know where I fit anymore. The last time I saw him in person was 5 years ago. He came to visit me in Seattle for a weekend. It was awkward at first, like we were both performing versions of ourselves we thought the other wanted to see. We drank, told old stories, laughed till we cried. For a few hours, it felt like the old days. Then he left early Sunday morning. No goodbye hug, just a quick wave and, "Catch you later, man." We didn't catch each other later. There were birthdays missed, texts left unread, promises to hang out soon that neither of us followed through on. I thought about reaching out, but pride, or maybe fear, stopped me. I told myself he'd changed, but maybe I had too. So when he called today, I should have been happy. But instead, it felt like hearing that a chapter of my life had officially closed. I thought about the nights we'd stay up until 3 a.m. talking about what we wanted to do with our lives. He used to say he couldn't imagine his wedding without me standing next to him as his best man. I guess he could now, the weirdest part. I wasn't even angry, just sad, the kind of sadness that comes with realizing someone grew up without you. I scrolled through old photos that night, us at the lake, Halloween parties, his beat-up Ford truck that smelled like gasoline and fast food. I could almost hear his laugh again. That big, contagious one that could fill a room. Then I saw the last picture we ever took together. It was blurry, taken at some dive bar. We were both smiling, arms slung around each other, pretending like we hadn't already started drifting apart. I don't know if I'll be invited to the wedding. Part of me hopes I am, but another part hopes I'm not. Because standing there, watching him marry someone who probably knows him better than I ever did, might be the final proof that the person I used to call my best friend doesn't exist anymore. Still, I can't shake the memory of that call. The way he said, "You'd like her." Like he thought I'd still be part of his world, still care enough to meet her, still fit into his life somehow. Maybe in another version of the world, where we stayed close, I'd be his best man. We'd laugh about old times, I'd give a speech that made him cry and pretend not to. But in this one, I'll probably just hear about it secondhand through someone else. Before I went to bed, I texted him one more time. "Hey man, congrats again. You deserve it. I'm proud of you," he replied a few minutes later. "Thanks, bro. Means a lot. Let's catch up soon." And I knew we wouldn't. But somehow, that was okay. It's been about 3 months since Eric called me about the wedding. I didn't plan to write an update, but something happened recently that pulled me right back into that mix of nostalgia and ache I thought I'd already buried. After that call, life just kept moving. Work, bills, the same cycle of everyday distractions that make time blur. But in the back of my mind, I kept thinking about him. About the years that slipped away, the versions of us that existed in old photos and faded memories. Then, about a month ago, I got an envelope in the mail. It was a wedding invitation. My first reaction was confusion, not because I was surprised, but because part of me assumed I wouldn't be invited. I mean, we hadn't spoken more than a handful of times in the past 5 years. The invite was addressed properly. My full name in his messy handwriting, but the card inside was sleek and formal, the kind of thing you can tell someone else designed. Eric and Megan, it read. Together with their families, request the honor of your presence. I just stared at it for a while. It didn't feel real. I kept trying to picture him, Eric, in a tuxedo, standing at an altar, saying vows. I tried to imagine her face. Megan, someone I'd never met, who somehow became the person he'd chosen for life. I RSVP'd yes before I could talk myself out of it. The wedding was in late September, a 3-hour drive from where I live. I booked a cheap Airbnb and told myself it would be fine, that I was just there to show support, nothing more. But the truth was, I wanted closure. When I pulled up to the venue, a vineyard with white chairs lined up under a big oak tree, I sat in my car for 10 minutes, watching people arrive. Everyone looked polished, confident, like they belonged there. I felt like a stranger sneaking into someone else's family reunion. Then I saw him. He was standing near the entrance, talking to someone, his hands shoved in his pockets like always. For a second, he looked exactly the same. Same messy hair, same crooked grin. But when he turned his head, I saw the little lines around his eyes, the way he carried himself. Calmer, older, more grounded. He spotted me before I could decide whether to walk over. His eyes lit up, and he came toward me with that familiar energy I hadn't felt in years. "Man, you actually came," he said, pulling me into a hug. I laughed awkwardly. "Yeah, wouldn't miss it." He looked genuinely happy to see me, and for a few moments, it felt natural again. We talked a bit, small talk mostly. He told me he'd been nervous, that Megan was freaking out about the flowers. I nodded, joked about him finally settling down. Then he said, "I'm really glad you're here. It means a lot." It should have been comforting. But instead, it stirred something deeper. Like maybe all those years of silence didn't matter anymore. Or maybe they still did. And we were just pretending they didn't. During the ceremony, I sat near the back. I watched him stand there, eyes locked on her, voice steady when he said his vows. She looked beautiful, kind, the kind of woman who seemed to bring peace wherever she went. I couldn't help but think how she probably knew him in a way I never could. When they kissed, the crowd cheered, and I felt this weird mix of joy and grief at the same time. Joy for him, for finding someone who fit him so well, and grief for the version of our friendship that had quietly died somewhere along the way. At the reception, I found a seat near the edge of the tent. I didn't know anyone there, though a few faces looked vaguely familiar. I was halfway through my drink when a voice behind me said, "So, you're the Josh." I turned around. It was Megan. She was smiling, holding a glass of champagne. "Eric's told me about you," she said. "You're the guy who used to drag him out of trouble in high school, right?" I laughed. "Yeah, that was me." She sat down next to me, and we talked for a while. She was easy to like, funny, warm, thoughtful. I could see why he loved her. She told me how they met, apparently through work, and how nervous he was before their first date. Then she said something that stuck with me. "He said you were his anchor back then, that he wishes he'd kept in better touch." I didn't know what to say. My throat tightened, and I just nodded. Later that night, after the dancing and the toasts, Eric found me outside near the parking lot. The lights from the tent spilled across the grass, and music thumped softly in the distance. He handed me a beer and said, "Feels weird, huh?" "Yeah," I said quietly. "In a good way." He took a sip and looked out toward the vineyard. "I missed this," he said. "Just hanging out with you. I don't know why we let so much time go by," I shrugged. "Life, I guess. Happens to everyone," he nodded. "Still, I should have tried harder." We stood there for a long moment, neither of us talking. The kind of silence that feels heavy but honest. Finally, he said, "I'm glad you came, man. Really, when I drove back to my Airbnb that night, I didn't feel the same emptiness I did after his first call. Instead, there was this quiet acceptance, like I finally understood that people drift apart, not always because they stop caring, but because they grow in different directions. Eric and I aren't best friends anymore. And that's okay. He has a life now, a wife, a home, responsibilities, and I have mine. We're just different versions of the same two kids who once swore we'd never lose touch." Before I left town the next morning, I stopped by a coffee shop. My phone buzzed with a message from him. "Thanks again for coming. Let's not wait another 5 years to hang out." I smiled at that. Maybe we won't, or maybe we will. But for the first time, it doesn't feel like something I need to fix. Sometimes, letting go of who someone used to be is the only way to appreciate who they've become. It's been almost a year since Eric's wedding, and I figured it's time to close this chapter for good. A few people messaged me asking how things turned out, whether we actually reconnected or if that night was just nostalgia dressed up as closure. Truth is, I didn't really know myself until recently. After the wedding, we texted back and forth for a bit. Nothing deep, just casual check-ins, memes, a few photos, updates about work. It was nice. At first, familiar for the first time in years, it felt like we were slowly rebuilding something, brick by brick. Then, as always, life stepped in. He and Megan moved to Denver. I switched jobs. Weeks turned into months. I noticed our messages getting fewer and farther between. He'd take longer to reply, and sometimes I'd forget to reply at all. Neither of us said it out loud. But I think we both knew we weren't really slipping again. We were just settling into what we'd become. Old friends with shared history, not daily presence. Then, a few weeks ago, I got another call from him. It was late, around 11 p.m. I almost didn't answer because I thought something was wrong. But his voice was calm, a little tired. "Hey, man," he said. "Sorry. Didn't mean to call so late." He told me they'd just had their first kid. A boy, his name was Caleb. I could hear the awe in his voice, the kind of raw, unfiltered joy that only comes once in a lifetime. He told me how small the baby's hands were, how Megan had been incredible through everything, how he hadn't slept in 2 days but didn't care. And then he said quietly, "You know, I told Megan if it was a boy, I wanted to name him after someone who kept me grounded, someone who always pulled me back when I was about to mess everything up." I laughed and said, "Well, Caleb's a great name." He paused for a second before saying, "I almost named him after you." I didn't know what to say. The line went quiet for a moment, except for the faint hum of hospital noise in the background. My throat tightened, and I could only manage. "That means a lot, man." We talked for another half hour, about fatherhood, marriage, the weird ways adulthood changes you. It wasn't the kind of conversation that fixes years of distance, but it reminded me that underneath all the change, the connection was still there, maybe smaller, quieter, but real. After we hung up, I sat there in my dark apartment, staring at the city lights outside my window. For the first time, I didn't feel that ache of loss anymore. I just felt grateful. Grateful that he'd found happiness. Grateful that I'd been part of his life, even if that part had faded with time. Grateful that some friendships don't need to be constant to still matter. A few days later, he sent me a photo of him holding Caleb. He looked exhausted, smiling in that way only new dads do. Like he'd just discovered a new piece of his heart he didn't know existed. Under the picture, he texted, "You'll meet him someday. He's gonna need a cool uncle." That message made me laugh harder than I'd expected. It hit me then. Maybe friendship doesn't end when you stop talking every day. Maybe it just changes form. The version of Eric I grew up with is gone. Sure, but the man he became? I still get glimpses of that same kid from the lake. The one who used to dream big and laugh loud and swear we'd always be brothers. I realized I don't miss the friendship we had. I miss the time we lived it in, the late-night drives, the cheap beer, the dumb plans that somehow always worked out. But I've made peace with that now. We grew up. That's what we were supposed to do. Last weekend, I sent him a small gift for the baby. A tiny pair of sneakers and a handwritten note that just said, "Welcome to the world, kid. You've got a good dad." He texted back a photo of Caleb wearing them with a simple message. "He'll hear plenty of stories about you someday." And maybe that's enough. Maybe some friendships don't need to go back to what they were. Maybe they just need to be honored for what they gave us, and for what they quietly leave behind. Eric's not my best friend anymore, but he was when I needed him most. And sometimes that's more than enough. I deleted the old photos off my phone last night. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I finally didn't need reminders. Those memories live in me already. Untouchable. Unchangeable. Funny thing is, if he called me tomorrow, I'd pick up without hesitation, not out of obligation or nostalgia, but because he's still one of the few people in this world who knew me before I learned to hide behind who I've become. And that version of me, the one he remembers, still deserves to answer. Stories number 2, my dad's one sentence that saved my relationship. I never thought a single sentence could change the entire course of my life. But my dad said something to me one night that I still replay in my head every single time I'm angry, jealous, or scared in my relationship. It happened about 6 years ago. I was 26, dating this guy named Ethan for about a year. On paper, we were good together. He was a paramedic, worked crazy hours, and had this calm, kind energy that balanced out my more chaotic nature. I was working as a marketing coordinator in Chicago, constantly on my phone, juggling deadlines, caffeine, and anxiety. But we were fighting a lot. Mostly because of me, if I'm honest. I didn't know how to deal with feeling insecure. He'd get a text from a female coworker and suddenly I'd spiral. If he didn't respond to one of my messages for a few hours, I'd start thinking he was pulling away. One night, after another argument, I went to my parents' house. My mom had gone to bed, but my dad, Richard, was up watching some late-night baseball rerun. He muted the TV when he saw me standing there with puffy eyes. He didn't say, "What's wrong?" Like most people do, he just motioned for me to sit. I plopped down next to him, trying to hold back tears. Finally, I told him everything. How Ethan didn't make me feel secure. How I felt like I was always guessing what he was thinking. How I just wanted him to prove he cared. My dad listened quietly. He didn't interrupt, didn't give any of those "you'll be fine" cliches. When I was done, he sighed and said, "You know, honey, the worst thing you can do to love is treat it like a test." I frowned. "What does that mean?" He leaned back and said, "If you keep making someone prove they love you, eventually they'll stop trying. Love isn't a pop quiz, it's a collaboration. Either you believe in it or you don't." That hit me hard. I went home that night and sat in my car for a while before going inside. Ethan was asleep on the couch. There was this half-eaten bowl of mac and cheese on the coffee table and his phone plugged in on the armrest. No secret messages. No drama, just him being his usual exhausted self. I remember sitting on the floor next to the couch and just crying quietly because I realized I'd been fighting a ghost. Ethan hadn't changed. I had. I'd turned our relationship into a series of pop quizzes he didn't even know he was taking. The next morning, I made breakfast for both of us. When he came into the kitchen, still groggy and scratching his head, I just blurted it out. "I'm sorry, I've been testing you. I don't want to do that anymore." He looked surprised. "What do you mean?" I said, "I keep waiting for you to fail instead of just trusting that you're here because you want to be." He stared at me for a second, then smiled and pulled me into a hug. "Okay," he said softly. "Let's start from there." That conversation changed everything. Over the next few months, things between us got better. Slowly. Then all at once, we talked more openly. I started journaling instead of lashing out when I got anxious. He made more effort to communicate when he had long shifts. It felt like we were finally on the same team. A year later we moved in together, 2 years after that. We got married in a small ceremony in Colorado, just our families and a few close friends. My dad gave a speech that made everyone cry. He didn't even mention that night directly, but he ended it with, "Love is trust, not a test." Now it's been almost 6 years since that talk. Ethan and I still argue sometimes, because that's life. But there's this underlying respect that never fades. We've built something that feels like home, even on the messy days. The funny part is, whenever my friends come to me with relationship problems, I always end up repeating my dad's words. One of them, Jessica, was going through a rough patch with her boyfriend, Liam, and I told her the same thing. She texted me a few weeks later and said, "I think your dad just saved my relationship too." It's wild how something so simple can carry so much truth. So, yeah, the most valuable relationship advice I've ever gotten didn't come from a therapist, a book, or TikTok. It came from my dad. Half asleep, wearing a faded Cubs t-shirt, watching baseball reruns, and that advice? Don't treat love like a test. If you trust it, it'll grow. If you don't, it'll crumble, no matter how much you think you're holding it together. Sometimes I think about how easily I could have ruined something good. How close I was to walking away from Ethan over my own fears. And then I think about that one night, that one sentence, and how it rerouted my entire life. So if you're reading this and you're constantly wondering whether your partner really loves you, ask yourself this instead. Are you giving them a chance to show it freely? Or are you making them prove it to pass your test? Because love can survive almost anything, except constant doubt. Update. My dad's one sentence that saved my relationship. Hey Reddit, it's been a few years since I wrote that post about the advice my dad gave me. Don't treat love like a test. I didn't really expect anyone to read it, but somehow it blew up. People messaged me, telling me it helped them rethink their relationships. I even got one DM from a woman who said she printed it out and gave it to her husband after a fight. Wild. I figured I owed you all an update because life has changed a lot. And not in the ways I expected. Ethan and I have been married for almost 5 years now. We bought a small house just outside of Madison, Wisconsin. It's not fancy, just a 2-bedroom with creaky floors, a garden that keeps trying to die, and neighbors who bring over too many zucchini. But it's ours. Life isn't movie perfect. We've been through some rough patches, the kind that either breaks you or binds you tighter. The first big one came about 3 years into our marriage, when I got laid off from my job. The company I worked for downsized the entire marketing team. I remember sitting in my car afterward, clutching the severance paperwork and feeling like my entire identity had evaporated. Ethan tried to be supportive, but I could tell it scared him too. Money got tight, and I started getting snappy again. The old me, the anxious, overthinking version, started creeping back one night. After I snapped at him for buying the wrong brand of coffee seriously, he quietly said, "You're testing me again." That sentence hit like a gut punch. He wasn't angry, just tired, and I realized he was right. I was back in that same cycle of making him prove he cared instead of believing it. That night, we didn't talk much, but the next morning, I went for a long walk around the neighborhood. It was cold, that kind of sharp Wisconsin cold that burns your cheeks. And I just cried behind my sunglasses. I felt like a failure. When I got back, Ethan was sitting at the kitchen table with 2 mugs of coffee. Yes, the wrong kind. I sat down across from him and said, "I'm sorry. I forgot." He reached across the table, took my hand and said, "It's okay. We both forget sometimes. The trick is remembering before we lose each other." That became kind of our mantra. I found a new job about 6 months later, this time doing remote work for a small creative agency out of Denver. I was happier, more balanced. I started therapy too, mostly to deal with my anxiety and trust issues, which honestly should have happened years ago. And something shifted in me. I stopped needing to control everything. I started trusting people, not just Ethan, but my friends, my coworkers, even myself. Speaking of friends, remember Jessica and her boyfriend Liam? They actually got married last year. She told me during her bachelorette weekend that she still thinks about that advice. That it's what made her realize love isn't about proving. It's about choosing. But this story wouldn't be real if it was all sunshine. Last winter my dad passed away, heart attack. It was sudden. One of those calls that knocks the air out of you. Ethan drove us straight to my parents' house that night. When we walked in, my mom, Elaine, was sitting at the kitchen table. The same table where my dad had once told me that sentence that changed my life. The grief hit in waves. I remember sitting in his recliner a few days later. The one with the worn armrest and the Cubs blanket draped over it. And just sobbing, Ethan knelt beside me, resting his head against my shoulder. I didn't say anything for a long time. Finally, I whispered, "He's the reason I didn't ruin us," Ethan said softly. "He'd be proud that you learned how to love without testing it." We held each other for a long time. That moment, in its quiet, raw simplicity, felt like the full circle of everything my dad had ever taught me about love. A few weeks later, my mom gave me something. It was one of my dad's old notebooks. He used to write little thoughts in it. Quotes, baseball stats, grocery lists. On one page, there was a line written in his messy handwriting. "Love doesn't need proof. It needs presence." That one sentence felt like an echo of everything he'd ever told me. Now, whenever Ethan and I argue or hit a rough patch, because that's inevitable, I remind myself, be present, not perfect. Recently, we started talking about having kids. It's terrifying, honestly, but I keep thinking about the kind of dad Ethan will be. Calm, patient, steady, and I hope that someday, if we have a daughter who finds herself crying on a couch over love, he'll tell her the same thing my dad told me. Sometimes, when I sit on our porch in the evenings, watching Ethan mow the lawn or hearing the sound of kids playing down the street, I think about how one small piece of advice reshaped my entire life, how something so simple could ripple out into generations of love and patience. If my dad were still here, I'd tell him thank you, not just for the advice, but for teaching me that love isn't about being flawless. It's about staying, showing up, and choosing trust even when fear screams louder. So if anyone reading this needs a sign, maybe you're in a rough place, maybe you keep testing your partner, maybe you're afraid to trust again. This is it. You don't need proof, you need presence, and sometimes, that's the only test that matters. Final update, hey Reddit, it feels surreal typing this. It's been almost 10 years since I first wrote that post about my dad's advice. Don't treat love like a test. I've reread it a few times over the years, and every time, it feels like a snapshot of a younger version of me. Scared, hopeful, still figuring out what love really meant. A lot has happened since my last update. Some of it beautiful, some of it hard, and all of it life. After my dad passed, something in me shifted for good. Grief has this way of making you see the world in sharper contrast. Love feels bigger, time feels shorter, and small moments start to matter so much more. Ethan and I promised each other then that we'd stop putting off the things we said we'd get to eventually. So we tried. We traveled. Nothing extravagant, just road trips through the Midwest, hiking in national parks, little diners off the highway that had the best pie you've ever tasted. We started volunteering at an animal rescue together. We adopted a rescue dog, a goofy golden retriever we named Harper after the author of To Kill a Mockingbird. Ethan let me choose the name because, in his words, "You've earned naming rights after surviving marketing layoffs and my coffee mistakes." And then, about 4 years ago, I found out I was pregnant. That day is burned into my brain. I remember sitting on the bathroom floor with the test in my hand, shaking, laughing, and crying all at once. Ethan came home early from a shift, and I just blurted it out before he even took off his shoes. "I'm pregnant." He froze, then this slow, stunned smile spread across his face. He whispered, "You're serious?" And I nodded. He started laughing, this joyful, disbelieving laugh, and hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. Our daughter, Maya, was born that December. She had Ethan's calm eyes and my stubborn chin. She's 3 now, curious, messy, funny, and somehow already more independent than I ever was at 26. Parenthood cracked me open in ways I didn't expect. It's exhausting, of course, but it's also like someone turned the volume up on life. The love I feel for her is so massive, so humbling, that it sometimes scares me. And yet I keep coming back to what my dad said. Love isn't a test, it's trust. When Maya was about 1, I had this night I'll never forget. She was teething, screaming at 2 a.m., and I was at my wit's end. Ethan had just come off a 12-hour shift and was passed out cold in the next room. I remember standing in the dark, rocking her, whispering, it's okay, over and over at some point. I just started crying too, out of exhaustion, out of love, out of everything. And then I thought of my dad. I could almost hear him saying, presence, not proof. So I stopped trying to calm her perfectly. I just held her. I sang off key. I cried quietly into her little curls. Eventually she fell asleep, her tiny hand gripping my finger. That moment, standing in the dark, messy, and imperfect, felt like the purest form of love I've ever known. Ethan and I aren't perfect parents. We fight about bedtime routines, about who forgot to restock diapers, about whose turn it is to do laundry. But underneath it all, there's this steady heartbeat of trust. We don't test each other anymore. We tag in, we step up, we forgive fast, and sometimes when things get hard, Ethan will look at me and say, "Hey, remember what your dad said?" And I'll smile because I always do. Last year, on what would have been my dad's 70th birthday, my mom, Elaine, came to visit. We planted a small oak tree in the backyard. Maya helped dig the hole, mostly by flinging dirt everywhere. And when we were done, my mom handed me something wrapped in tissue paper. It was a framed copy of that line from my dad's notebook. Love doesn't need proof. It needs presence. It hangs in our hallway now, right by the front door. Every time I grab my keys or my bag on the way out, I see it. It's become this quiet reminder of everything that matters. I know Reddit doesn't usually get sentimental, but I can't help it. That advice didn't just save my relationship. It shaped my marriage, my parenting, my friendships, my entire worldview. It's the reason I learned how to stay when things get uncomfortable, how to listen instead of defend, and how to love without keeping score. A few months ago, Maya had her first little friend fight. She came home from preschool upset because her best friend, Owen, wouldn't share a toy. I knelt down and asked her, "Do you still love him even though he made you sad?" She nodded. I said, "Then maybe you can forgive him. Love isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up." She thought about it for a second and said, "Like you and Daddy?" And I swear I almost cried right there in the kitchen. Because somehow, at 3 years old, she already understood the heart of it. So here I am, 10 years later, sitting at the same kitchen table where I once typed out that first post. The coffee's gone cold, the dog's asleep under my feet, Maya's building something with blocks in the living room, and Ethan's humming while he fixes a loose cabinet door. Life isn't flashy. It's full of noise and clutter and love that shows up in small, quiet ways. A hand on your shoulder, "Did you eat today?" Text, a shared laugh after a long week. If my dad could see us now, I think he'd smile. Not because everything turned out perfect. It didn't. But because we learned the lesson he tried to teach me all those years ago. Love doesn't need proof, it just needs you. Stories number 3. My best friend's fiancé fell in love with my old prom dress. So this sounds like a bad sitcom setup, but I promise it's real. I'm 27, and my best friend, Olivia, is getting married in a few months. We've been friends since middle school. We've gone through everything together. Breakups, bad dye jobs, college roommates, even matching tattoos when we were 19 and thought we'd be ride or die forever. Lately, though, things have felt off. She's been wrapped up in wedding planning, which I totally understand, but she's been acting kind of condescending, like she suddenly became this high society bride who looks down on anything cheap or tacky. It's weird because her fiancé, Ethan, is super chill and not like that at all. Anyway, about 2 weeks ago, Olivia invited me to her dress fitting. I thought she already had a dress, but she said she wanted to show me the dream gown she finally found. We got to the boutique, and she came out wearing this long cream-colored satin dress with a lace-up back and subtle beading around the waist. The moment she stepped out, I froze. I knew that dress. It wasn't some designer find. It was my old prom dress. I bought it when I was 18 from a vintage consignment shop in Seattle. I remember it perfectly because it was the first nice dress I ever bought for myself. I worked extra shifts at a coffee shop to afford it. I loved that dress so much I kept it for years, until I eventually sold it to a thrift store when I moved to Chicago after college. It had a tiny snag near the hem that I stitched up myself. When Olivia turned around, I saw that same little uneven stitch near the bottom. It was my exact dress. I didn't say anything at first. She was twirling in front of the mirror, gushing about how this dress feels like it was made for me. Her mom was crying. Ethan's mom was taking pictures, and the boutique attendant was acting like Olivia was some kind of princess. I just sat there, feeling like the ground had tilted under me. Afterward, I asked her casually where she got it. She said, "Oh, this adorable little consignment boutique downtown. I can't believe no one grabbed it before me." She had no idea. But here's where it gets messy. A few nights later, Ethan texted me. He's not one to reach out much, so I was surprised. He said he wanted to ask me something about the dress, because apparently he'd seen an old photo of me at prom on Facebook. I still had that picture up. It's me, in that exact same dress, standing in front of my parents' old house. He wrote, "Hey, I don't want to make this weird, but isn't Olivia's wedding dress the same as your prom dress?" I told him yes, it looked like it, he replied. That's wild. She's been calling it her once-in-a-lifetime find. She said it reminded her of you in some way. That part hit me strangely. Why would she say that? Ethan said he didn't mean to overstep but found it a little ironic. I told him it wasn't a big deal. But the truth is, it did bother me. I started thinking about how many times Olivia had borrowed things from me growing up. Clothes, ideas, even hairstyles. I didn't mind then, but this felt deeper. Like she wanted to take something that was mine and make it hers completely. Still, I let it go. Until last weekend, Olivia invited a bunch of us over for wine night. Her mom, Ethan's mom, and a few bridesmaids were there, out of nowhere. She brought up how she scored the perfect vintage dress for a fraction of the price of those high-end designers. Everyone oohed and awed over it. She even said, "It's so unique. No one else in the world has a dress like this." I don't know what came over me, but I laughed. Not a big laugh, just a small one. Like a breath I didn't mean to let out. Everyone turned to look at me, and Olivia narrowed her eyes. "What's so funny?" she asked. I tried to brush it off, but she pushed. So I said, "It's just, that dress actually isn't one of a kind. I had the same one for prom." The room went dead silent. Olivia blinked at me, her face going pale. "You're joking." I told her no, I wasn't. I even pulled up my old prom photo to show her. Same dress, same stitching on the hem. She went off, said I was lying to make her feel bad, accused me of trying to ruin her moment, and then stormed off. The rest of the night was painfully awkward. Her mom tried to smooth things over, but you could feel the tension. Since then, Olivia's been cold. She's barely texting me. Ethan apologized on her behalf, saying she just feels embarrassed. But honestly, I don't think embarrassment covers it. I think she's angry that I broke the illusion, that her perfect, unique, destined for her wedding dress turned out to be a second-hand prom dress her best friend once wore. And now I keep wondering, would I be the jerk if I told Ethan the full truth? That Olivia didn't just happen to find a similar gown? It's literally my old dress. I have receipts, photos, even the store listing where I sold it years ago. Part of me feels like it's not my place, but another part can't stop thinking about how weird it is that she never told him where it really came from, especially after he already noticed the connection. It's not about the dress itself, it's about what it means, about how she's trying to live in some fairy tale version of herself that was never real to begin with. I keep thinking about the night of that prom, how proud I was of that dress because I'd worked for it. Olivia didn't have to lift a finger. She just stumbled upon it years later and made it her dream gown. Maybe I should just stay quiet and let her have her fantasy. But every time I picture her walking down the aisle in my dress, pretending it's something she discovered, something magical, I feel this strange mix of sadness and disbelief, because maybe that's what our friendship has turned into. Her taking pieces of me until she can't tell where her story ends and mine begins. Update: it's been a couple of weeks since everything blew up, and honestly, things have gotten even stranger. After that wine night, Olivia didn't reach out for days. I figured she just needed space, so I didn't push. But then I started hearing from mutual friends that she'd been telling people I tried to humiliate her in front of her mom and bridal party. She said I made up the whole prom dress story because I was jealous at first. I laughed it off because I thought no one would believe something that ridiculous. But then I realized people did believe her. A few bridesmaids started acting weird toward me. One even uninvited me from a group brunch because it might be awkward for Olivia. I wasn't going to engage until Ethan texted me again last Thursday. He asked if we could talk in person because things had gotten tense at home. He said Olivia was upset all the time and that her mom thought I owed her an apology for ruining her wedding energy. So we met for coffee. Ethan looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept well in days, he said. I know Olivia can get dramatic, but I just want to understand what really happened with the dress. I told him everything, from buying it when I was 18, to fixing the hem, to eventually donating it to a consignment shop after I moved. I even showed him the PayPal transaction from when I sold it to the store. He sat there quietly the whole time, scrolling through my photos and messages, and finally just said, "Yeah, it's the same dress. There's no question." Then he admitted something that made my stomach twist. Apparently, after that wine night, Olivia told him she'd found inspiration for her dress from my prom photo. She said she told the boutique what she wanted, and they recreated something similar. But when Ethan brought up the little stitching flaw and the tag inside the dress, which still had a tiny faded mark from the thrift store, she got defensive and said he was ruining her joy. He told me he didn't want to fight with her, but it was hard pretending not to see it. We ended up sitting in silence for a while, and then he said something I haven't been able to stop thinking about. He said, "You know, Olivia has always wanted to be like you. Not in a creepy way, but she copies people she admires and she's always admired you." That hit me harder than I expected, because once he said it, everything clicked. The matching tattoos she pushed for, the way she started dressing like me in college, the same haircuts, the same perfume. At first, it all felt like normal friend stuff. But now I see it differently. She doesn't just want to be like me, she wants to be me. After coffee, I told Ethan I didn't plan to bring it up again. He thanked me for being honest and said he'd handle things on his end. I left feeling weirdly heavy, like I'd just told a secret that shouldn't have been mine to tell. 2 days later, Olivia texted me, "No greeting, no small talk, just, you had no right to talk to Ethan about my dress." "You've crossed a line," I replied. "You made me look like a liar. I just told the truth." She fired back that I was trying to sabotage her wedding, and that she couldn't believe I would insert myself into something that wasn't even about me anymore. That part hit me. Wasn't about me anymore. Because how do you explain that it became about me the moment she walked into that boutique wearing a piece of my past? Anyway, after that text exchange, I thought that was the end of it, but no. This week, her sister, who I've always been close to, called me and told me that Olivia is now saying she's thinking about uninviting me from the wedding altogether. Apparently, she doesn't want any bad energy around her on her special day. Her sister said she tried to talk Olivia out of it. But Olivia's dug in. She's embarrassed and angry, and apparently, she's told everyone that I've been obsessed with her relationship ever since she got engaged, which is insane. So now I'm sitting here wondering if I should even want to go to this wedding anymore. Ethan hasn't said anything since our coffee, but her sister mentioned that he's been quieter lately and seems checked out. I don't know what's going on there, but it sounds like there's tension. I don't want to cause more drama, but I also don't want to be the scapegoat for her insecurities. It's like she's rewriting the story to make me the villain, because facing the truth would mean admitting she's not as original or perfect as she pretends to be. And the thing that bothers me the most? She hasn't once said, "I didn't know it was yours." She just went straight to anger, like she did know and got caught. I've gone back and forth in my head 100 times about telling Ethan the whole truth, that it's not just inspired by my old dress. It is my old dress, but what's the point now? He already suspects it. And if she's willing to lie to him about something as small as a dress, I can't imagine what their marriage will look like later. I used to think Olivia was the kind of friend who'd be in my life forever. Now I'm realizing she's someone who only values the version of me she can use, so no, I'm not apologizing. And if she really does uninvite me, maybe that's for the best. Because watching her walk down the aisle in my prom dress isn't something I think I can stomach anymore. But a part of me can't help but wonder what Ethan will think. Standing there at the altar, knowing his bride is wearing someone else's story. Final update, the wedding happened last weekend. Or at least most of it did. After Olivia's text telling me I'd crossed a line, we didn't speak again for almost a month. I accepted that the friendship was done. I stopped trying to defend myself in group chats and just let people believe whatever they wanted. A few friends drifted, a few stayed neutral, and 1 or 2 quietly told me they thought Olivia was being ridiculous. A week before the wedding, her sister Emily called me again. She said, "You might want to sit this one out. Liv's been tense, and she's still blaming you for everything." I told her I'd already decided not to go. It wasn't about being petty, it was about peace. I didn't want to be the person everyone side-eyed while Olivia pretended her life was perfect. But then, the night before the wedding, Ethan texted me. He wrote, "I'm sorry for everything that's happened. I just wanted you to know that I really appreciate your honesty. You didn't deserve the way this all played out." I asked if he was okay. He said, "I will be." That was it. I didn't think much more about it until the next morning, around 11 a.m., my phone started lighting up with notifications from mutual friends. One sent a message that just said, "Holy crap. Did you hear what happened at the wedding?" Here's what I know, mostly from Emily and another friend who was there. Everything started off fine. The ceremony was outdoors at this fancy vineyard outside Portland. Guests were seated, the music started, and Olivia appeared at the top of the aisle in the dress, my old prom dress, now with a few alterations. She'd added extra beading at the neckline and removed the lace-up back, but it was still unmistakably the same satin cream dress I once wore. She looked beautiful, I can admit that, but apparently, when she reached the altar, Ethan looked like a statue. Not nervous, just blank. When the officiant began speaking, Ethan interrupted. He asked for the mic, which no one expected. He started by saying he loved Olivia, that she'd been a huge part of his life for the last 3 years. Then he said, "But I can't start a marriage with a lie." Everyone thought he was about to admit something himself. Instead, he said, "Olivia told everyone this dress was her dream find. The truth is, it used to belong to someone else. And she's known that for months, apparently." Olivia tried to shush him, whispering something like, "Stop, you're humiliating me." But he kept going. He said, "It's not about the dress. It's about the way you rewrite things to make them yours. About how you pretend pieces of other people's lives belong to you." Guests were whispering. Her mom was crying. The officiant looked like he wanted to disappear. Ethan didn't yell. He didn't accuse. He just said, "If we're starting forever, I need to know who I'm really marrying." Then he handed her the mic and walked off the stage. He didn't storm away dramatically or anything, just quietly left. Olivia froze, standing there in silence for almost a full minute, before the officiant awkwardly asked if they wanted to take a moment. According to Emily, Olivia eventually ran off in tears, and the ceremony never resumed. The reception was canceled within an hour. Guests were told to enjoy the food and drinks if they wanted to stay. But most people left early. I didn't find out any of this until later that night, when Emily came by my apartment. She looked exhausted. She said, "He's gone. He packed his stuff from the hotel and left with his brother." Apparently, Ethan told Emily that he didn't want to talk to anyone for a few days. I asked her how Olivia was. She just said, "She's blaming you." Of course she is. Emily said Olivia kept insisting that I planted the idea in Ethan's head to ruin the wedding. But she also admitted that Olivia had known it was my dress the whole time. She'd recognized it from the start, but thought I wouldn't remember or care. She only got angry when she realized Ethan did care. That part hurt more than I expected, because all this time, I was trying to figure out if she'd done it on purpose or by coincidence. Turns out she knew. She just didn't think I mattered enough for it to matter. I haven't heard from her since. Not a word. Ethan messaged me once, 2 days after the wedding, to say he's staying with family for now. He didn't get into details, but he wrote, "You were right to tell the truth. I wish I'd listened sooner." And that's it. It's strange. There's this quiet relief, but also grief. Olivia and I grew up together. I used to think she was my person, my chosen family. But looking back, maybe we were never equals. Maybe I was just the version of herself she wanted to perfect. It's not about the dress anymore. It never really was. It's about the way some people can take something that's yours, your memories, your effort, your identity, and wear it like it's theirs. And you only realize it when you see yourself reflected back through them. Slightly altered, slightly wrong. The dress is probably sitting somewhere right now, maybe in a crumpled heap in her mom's house. Once upon a time, it made me feel beautiful, strong, like I'd earned it. Now it feels like a symbol of everything I lost trying to keep a friendship alive that had already outgrown me. I don't hate Olivia. I think she's lost, in her own way. But I'm done letting her write me out of my own story. So I boxed up the last few things she ever gave me. The matching tattoo photo, the friendship bracelet, the dried flower from our high school graduation. And I tossed them. I'm keeping the memories, but I'm letting go of the rest. And if there's one thing I've learned from this whole mess, it's that some people don't want to share your light. They want to live inside it. That's not friendship. That's theft dressed up as love. Stories number 4. I've decided to be homeless. I know how that title sounds. Crazy, dramatic, maybe even stupid. I used to think the same thing when I saw people on the street with backpacks and cardboard signs. I never imagined I'd be one of them. But here I am, writing this from the back seat of my old Honda Civic, parked behind a grocery store that stays open 24 hours. It's not glamorous, it's not romantic, and it's definitely not something I ever planned. But it's the first decision in a long time that actually feels like mine. Let me back up a bit. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio. My parents were good people, hardworking, quiet, the type who believed in steady jobs and paying your bills on time. My dad was a mechanic, my mom a school librarian. I followed their script: college, degree, job, apartment, the whole adult starter pack. By 27, I had everything I was supposed to want. But the weird thing is, I felt like I was drowning every single day. I worked at a small marketing agency. It paid enough to keep me in a decent one-bedroom, pay off student loans, and afford craft beer on weekends. But it was soul-sucking. Every day was the same. Long meetings about meaningless projects, fake smiles, fake enthusiasm, fake everything. I'd wake up already tired. I started sleeping in my car during lunch breaks, just to escape the noise of it all. Then came the layoffs. They said it was restructuring. That's corporate code for we're cutting you loose. I wasn't even angry when it happened. I felt relieved, like I'd been waiting for someone else to pull the trigger for me. They gave me a small severance check, a handshake, and a reminder to return my company laptop. That was 8 months ago. At first, I did what everyone told me to do. Polish the resume, send out applications, network on LinkedIn. I even forced myself to sound passionate in interviews for jobs I didn't care about. But each time, I felt that same familiar weight pressing on my chest. It was like I was trying to glue myself back into a version of life that had already fallen apart. Around month 4, my lease renewal came up. Rent had gone up by $200. My savings were dwindling, and the thought of signing another 12 months of pretending felt unbearable. I started packing boxes one night just to see how it felt, and it felt right, like shedding a skin that had grown too tight. The next morning, I loaded what I could into my car. A few bags of clothes, my sleeping bag, some books, my guitar, and a small cooler. I told myself it was temporary, just until I figured things out. But the truth is, I didn't want to figure it out. I wanted to let go. The first few nights were rough. You don't realize how loud the world is until you try to sleep in it. Trucks, sirens, people yelling, car doors slamming. It's constant. I parked near a Walmart at first, then moved around to different lots every night. It wasn't about being safe exactly. It was about being invisible. Eventually, I found a rhythm. Mornings at Planet Fitness for a shower, afternoons at the library for Wi-Fi, evenings at the park or by the river, where I'd cook ramen on a small camping stove and watch the sunset. I picked up part-time work doing delivery driving and odd jobs off Craigslist. It wasn't much, but it was enough for gas, food, and the occasional cheap motel when I needed a real bed. And weirdly, I started to feel free. No rent, no alarm clocks, no fake smiles, just me, the road, and the sound of the wind slipping through the cracked window at night. I started noticing things I'd ignored for years. How the air smells different after rain. How quiet mornings can feel sacred. How little you actually need when you strip everything else away. But it's not all poetic sunsets and freedom. Either. There are nights when I wake up cold and scared. When I hear footsteps too close to the car. When I wonder if I've completely lost my mind. There's shame, too. The way people look at you when they realize you're living out of your car, like you've failed at something everyone else is managing to do. One afternoon, I ran into someone I used to work with. Ryan, a guy who used to share a cubicle wall with me. He spotted me at a gas station, wearing the same clothes from the day before, filling up my tank with crumpled bills. Dude, what the hell? You okay? He asked. I told him the truth. That I'd quit everything and was living in my car by choice. He blinked at me like I'd told him I was joining a cult. You can't do that forever, he said. You'll ruin your life, I smiled. But inside I wanted to laugh, because the life he was talking about, the one with rent, commutes, and burnout, wasn't living. It was surviving in a cage. I know this isn't sustainable. I know winter's coming, and I can't sleep in a car when it's 10 degrees outside. But for now, this is the first time I've felt alive in years. Every day, I wake up and ask myself, what do I need today? Not what my boss needs, not what my landlord needs, not what society expects, just me. Sometimes the answer is as simple as food and quiet. Sometimes it's music. Sometimes it's just driving aimlessly down back roads until my head clears. I met others like me, too. People who fell through the cracks or walked away from them on purpose. There's Lisa, who lives in a van with her dog after her divorce, Tony, a retired vet who said he prefers the open air to 4 walls that never felt like home. They've taught me more about self-reliance and kindness than any office ever did. The funny thing is, I've stopped thinking of myself as homeless. I mean, yeah, technically I am, but I have a home. It just has wheels and smells faintly of gasoline and instant noodles. I've stopped chasing the life I thought I was supposed to have, and started living the one that makes sense to me. I'm not pretending it's noble or brave. It's not. It's messy, unpredictable, and sometimes terrifying. But it's honest. For the first time, my life feels like it actually belongs to me. My parents still don't know. I've talked to them on the phone a few times, made it sound like everything's fine. I don't have the heart to tell them their son is sleeping in a car. Maybe one day I will, when I can explain it without making them worry. Until then, I'm just taking it one day at a time. Last night, I parked by a lake just outside the city. The sky was clear, full of stars I hadn't seen in years. I leaned back in the driver's seat, cracked the window, and listened to crickets and the soft lap of water against the shore. And in that moment, with no rent, no deadlines, no noise, I realized something. I wasn't running away from life. I was finally stepping into it. It's been about 6 months since I first decided to live in my car. And honestly, I never thought I'd stick with it this long. When I wrote that first post, I was half convinced I'd cave after a few weeks. Find a cheap room somewhere, get another desk job, fall back into the system I swore I was done with. But somehow I'm still here. Still sleeping under the same faded blanket in the back seat of my Honda Civic. Still chasing sunrises, silence, and some kind of peace I didn't know how to find before. Winter was the real test. Around late December, the cold started biting hard. Every night I'd wrap myself in layers, 2 pairs of socks, gloves with holes in the fingertips, 3 hoodies, and that old army surplus sleeping bag I found at a thrift store in Indiana. Even then, there were nights when I could see my own breath in the air, curling up in front of me like smoke. I started sleeping in 24-hour parking lots near gas stations, just so I could sneak into the restroom and run hot water over my hands in the mornings. I picked up extra shifts doing food delivery, DoorDash, Uber Eats, whatever would pay. Sometimes I'd make enough in a night to splurge on a motel, which felt like heaven. A shower, a bed, heat. You stop realizing how much those things mean until you live without them for weeks. There were a few close calls too. One night, a cop knocked on my window around 2 a.m. I'd parked behind a grocery store. Half asleep, he asked if I was okay, ran my ID, then told me I couldn't stay there. He wasn't rude, just tired. "You should find a shelter," he said before driving off. But shelters around here fill up fast, and honestly, I'd rather take my chances in my car than risk losing what little I still own. Still, I've had good moments, really good ones. In January, I drove south to get away from the worst of the cold. Ended up in Tennessee, parking at rest stops and campgrounds. I met this older guy named Frank, who's been living out of an old RV since his wife passed. He said something that stuck with me. Most folks out here aren't running away. They're just tired of running toward things that never mattered. We'd sit by his little propane stove at night, drinking instant coffee and talking about life. He'd been a high school teacher once. Said he sold everything after his wife's funeral and never looked back. There was this peace about him I envied. Like he'd already made peace with all the noise the rest of us are still trying to escape. It made me think about why I started this in the first place. Back when I had a job, a routine, and an apartment, I thought freedom meant financial stability, a solid career, maybe a relationship, but now, sitting under the stars with everything I own in a few bags, I think freedom just means not pretending anymore. Around February, I started keeping a little journal. Nothing fancy, just a cheap notebook from a gas station. I write about where I sleep, who I meet, what I eat, what I feel. Some days it's gratitude, some days it's frustration. Some days it's just loneliness written in shaky pen strokes. Yeah, loneliness is still the hardest part. You don't realize how isolating the world can be until you're outside of it. People avoid eye contact when you're washing up in a bathroom sink. You start to feel invisible, like a shadow drifting through everyone else's routines. I've gone days without talking to anyone except cashiers. Sometimes I crave conversation so bad it hurts. In March, I ran into someone I didn't expect, Hannah, a girl I dated back in college. We bumped into each other at a coffee shop in Nashville. She almost didn't recognize me. I was wearing a hoodie that hadn't been washed in a week and had a few days' worth of beard going. When she asked where I was living, I hesitated for a second, then told her the truth. She didn't judge me, instead. She bought me a hot meal and sat down to talk. We caught up for over an hour. Laughing about stupid college stories before leaving, she said, "You look happier than you used to." That one line hit harder than anything anyone said to me in years. Because deep down, she was right. Despite everything, the cold, the hunger, the uncertainty, I am happier, or maybe not happier exactly, but lighter. There's no pretending now. No faking smiles from meetings, no hiding behind small talk. Just existence, stripped bare. By April, I started finding ways to make my situation work long-term. I signed up for a remote freelance gig doing digital marketing for small local shops. It doesn't pay much, but it's enough to keep me afloat. Between that and deliveries, I can cover gas, food, and the occasional cheap motel. I even started saving a little bit, not for rent or bills, but for something else. Something like building a small van setup. The car's been good to me, but it's too cramped. I dream of having a small van I can convert, nothing fancy. Just a bed, a tiny stove, maybe a solar panel. Something I can actually live in instead of just surviving. I know how all this sounds. Some people think I'm glorifying being homeless. I'm not. There's nothing pretty about waking up freezing, or rationing food, or wondering if your car battery will die in the middle of nowhere. But there's also something deeply real about it. Something honest and humbling that most people never experience because they're too busy chasing comfort. A few weeks ago, I drove back up to Ohio for a short visit. I hadn't seen my parents in nearly a year. I parked a few blocks from their house and just sat there for an hour. Staring at the porch light glowing through the trees, I almost didn't knock. I didn't want them to see me like this, but eventually I did. My mom cried when she opened the door. My dad didn't say much at first. Just pulled me into a hug. We sat at the kitchen table and I told them everything. I expected anger, disappointment, maybe even guilt trips. But they just listened when I finished. My dad sighed and said, "You've always been stubborn, son. But maybe that's what's keeping you alive." They offered to let me stay, of course, but I said no, it wasn't pride. It was choice. I needed to finish what I started. Before I left, my mom handed me a small box. Inside was an old Polaroid of me as a kid, standing barefoot in the yard with a huge grin. On the back, she'd written, "You always looked happiest when you were free." That photo's taped to my dashboard now. Every time I start the car, I see it and remind myself why I'm doing this. I don't know how long I'll keep living this way. Maybe a few more months, maybe longer. Maybe I'll save enough for that van. Maybe I'll eventually find a place that feels right to settle down. But for now, I'm exactly where I need to be. Somewhere between lost and found, between chaos and clarity. The roads become my home. And for the first time, I'm not running from anything. I'm just moving forward, wherever that takes me. It's been almost a year and a half since I made that decision. To live in my car. To walk away from everything I thought I was supposed to want. And now, sitting here watching the sun set over a desert highway outside of Flagstaff, I think it's finally time to call this the end of that story. I'm not living in my car anymore. But I'm also not back in the life I left behind. I'm somewhere in between. A few months after my last post, things started shifting. My freelance gigs were going well enough that I could finally stop hustling every single day just to eat. I'd built a small list of regular clients, mostly small businesses that didn't care where I worked from as long as I got the job done. I'd pull into a cafe with Wi-Fi or sit outside a library parking lot and work for hours, sometimes with a coffee, sometimes with just a bottle of water and a granola bar. I was surviving. But one morning I woke up and realized I wanted more than survival. I wanted a space that wasn't just a place to sleep. Somewhere I could breathe without wondering if a cop's flashlight would hit my face at 2 a.m. So I started saving seriously. I stopped driving long distances to chase sunsets and started staying put in small towns. I took more delivery jobs, picked up weekend shifts helping a friend of a friend with handyman work. Every dollar went into a little box under my passenger seat. By June, I'd saved just enough to buy an old 1998 Chevy Astro van off Facebook Marketplace. It was beat up, rust on the doors, the AC barely worked, but it ran. I named it June after the month I bought her. I spent the summer slowly turning that van into my version of home. A friend I met through a local mechanic, Derek, helped me gut the inside. I built a bed frame out of old wood pallets, installed some shelves, strung up fairy lights, and stuck a cheap fan to the wall. I bought a solar panel for my laptop and a portable power bank. For the first time in my adult life, I had a home that no one could take away from me. The first night I slept in that van, I cried. Not because I was sad, but because it felt like proof that I could build something for myself. From nothing, life since then hasn't been perfect. But it's been real. I've driven across 7 states in the past 6 months. Tennessee, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and now California. I've showered in gym bathrooms, washed dishes in gas station sinks, and watched more sunrises than I can count. Some days I work from the van, other days I park somewhere quiet and just exist. The loneliness is still there sometimes. It sneaks up in the quiet moments, watching families at rest stops, hearing laughter through an open window at night. I miss certain things, the warmth of company, the comfort of knowing exactly where you'll sleep, the little routines that used to fill my days. But I've learned to sit with the loneliness instead of running from it. Last month, I stopped in a small town called Winslow, Arizona. I was sitting outside a diner when a young couple approached me, Caleb and Sophie, both early 20s. Traveling in an old school bus they'd converted into a camper. We got to talking, and they invited me to their camp for dinner. We ended up spending 3 days together, cooking over a fire, sharing stories, laughing about the weird coincidences that brought us there. They reminded me that I wasn't as alone as I thought. There's a whole quiet community of people like us. Drifters, dreamers, escapees, each chasing something different, but all connected by the same desire for freedom. One night around that fire, Sophie said something that I haven't been able to shake since. You don't have to have roots to grow. You just have to stop running from where you're standing. That hit me hard, because for so long, even after I left everything, I was still running from my old self, from expectations, from the fear of failing again. That night, I realized I wasn't homeless anymore. I wasn't even nomadic in the way people on Instagram make it look. I was just living, and then came something I didn't expect. I reconnected with Hannah, the same girl from college I mentioned before. We'd kept in touch since running into each other in Nashville. Just small messages here and there, a few weeks ago. She texted saying she'd be visiting family in Arizona and asked if I wanted to meet up. We had coffee at this tiny place off Route 66. She asked how I'd been, what I'd seen, how long I planned to keep traveling. I told her the truth. I didn't know. She smiled and said, "You look peaceful." That's new. We ended up talking for hours. No expectations, no old regrets. Just two people catching up in the middle of nowhere. When we hugged goodbye, she said, "You should write all this down someday." Maybe that's what I'm doing right now. After that meeting, something changed in me again. For the first time, I started imagining a version of my life where I stay somewhere. Not because I have to, but because I want to. There's this little town outside Flagstaff called Bellamont. It's quiet, surrounded by pine trees, the kind of place that smells like wood smoke and rain. I've been parked here for a few weeks now. I help out at a local coffee shop a few days a week. Nothing official, just fixing things, unloading boxes, chatting with the regulars. The owner, Randy, lets me park behind the shop for free and hook into the outlet when I need power. For the first time in years, I'm thinking about staying, maybe not forever, but long enough to breathe without feeling like the world's spinning too fast. Sometimes at night, when I sit in the van with the lights off, I think about the version of me who used to stare at spreadsheets and fluorescent lights, dreaming of escape. He wouldn't believe how far I've come, or how little I own now. But maybe that's the point. Maybe I had to lose everything that didn't matter to finally see what does. A few days ago, I called my parents again. I told them where I was and what I've been doing. My mom cried again, happy tears this time. My dad said, "You sound like yourself again." Son, that one sentence broke me a little. Because he's right, I finally do sound like myself again. I don't know what's next. Maybe I'll stay here. Maybe I'll keep traveling. Maybe I'll find a place that feels like home and build something there. But whatever comes next, it won't be about running anymore. It'll be about choosing. I'm ending this story here. Not because it's over, but because it's mine now. I used to think being homeless meant having nothing. Now I know it just means you haven't found where you belong yet, and maybe, just maybe, I'm getting close. Stories number 5. My boyfriend's bathroom habits made me see him differently. When I first met Kyle, I honestly thought I'd hit the jackpot. He was funny, down to earth, and could cook better than anyone I'd ever dated. We met through mutual friends at a trivia night, hit it off immediately, and within a few weeks, we were spending most nights together. He had that kind of easy confidence that makes you feel comfortable around him. We started officially dating a few months later, and things were going great. I felt like I could finally exhale after a string of mediocre relationships. He was thoughtful, remembered small details, texted good morning every day without fail. When he met my roommate Alyssa, they got along well, which was a huge relief because she's basically my sister. Everything seemed normal. Then came the bathroom situation. It started the first weekend he stayed over for several days. I remember waking up Saturday morning to the sound of running water and some other noises. I tried to ignore it, thinking, okay, everyone poops, it's fine. But then I realized the running water wasn't just him washing his hands. It was the shower. At first, I thought maybe he just liked showering right after using the bathroom, whatever, right? But later that day, I noticed something weird. My shampoo bottle was half empty, like literally half. I hadn't used that much in a week. I mentioned it jokingly. "Dude, did you spill my shampoo or start drinking it?" He laughed it off and said, "Nah, I just like to make sure I'm clean, you know? I'm kind of a hygiene freak." I shrugged it off. But then the next morning, same thing. Shower running for 15 minutes, and when I walked by, I caught a whiff of something I couldn't quite place. It wasn't just shampoo. It smelled soapy in a weird all-over kind of way. I didn't bring it up again until the next weekend when I stayed at his apartment. I went to grab something from his bathroom cabinet, and inside was an entire lineup of products. Body wash, shampoo, conditioner, hand soap, face wash, all half empty. I said, "Wow, you go through this stuff fast." He laughed again. But this time he looked embarrassed. "Okay, don't judge me," he said. I can't poop without showering after every time." I blinked at him. "Every time? Like, even if you're out?" He nodded. "Yeah, I'll hold it until I get home. I just can't handle the idea of being not clean down there." I didn't know what to say. It wasn't gross exactly. It was just a lot. I mean, I've heard of people being picky about hygiene. But this was next level. Still, it wasn't hurting anyone, right? So I let it go, except once you notice something like that, you can't unnotice it. When he came over to my place, he'd leave the bathroom smelling like a Bath and Body Works store exploded. My water bill spiked. Once I accidentally walked in because I thought he was done, and he was standing there, towel around his waist, wiping down the toilet seat with disinfectant wipes. I froze. He looked mortified. "I was just making sure it's clean for you," he stammered. I laughed awkwardly and said, "Okay, Mr. Sanitary," but inside I was starting to feel uneasy. It got weirder. If we went on road trips, he'd plan routes specifically around hotels or places where he could freshen up. He refused to use public restrooms unless there was a shower attached, which, let's be real, is almost never. Once, we went to visit my friend Travis and his wife Dana for a weekend. The second morning, Kyle vanished for almost an hour. When I finally found him, he was in their guest bathroom, shower running. I pulled him aside later and said, "Babe, you can't just take hour-long showers at people's houses without telling them." He looked embarrassed again and said, "I know, I just couldn't. I needed to. I tried to be understanding, but it started taking a toll. We couldn't travel spontaneously, couldn't spend a day out without him getting anxious about, what if I need to go?" He started avoiding long hikes, long drives, even brunches. One night I finally asked, "Have you ever talked to someone about this, like a therapist?" He got defensive. "It's not a problem," he snapped. "I just have higher standards for hygiene than most people." That shut me up, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. I started tiptoeing around the topic, pretending I didn't notice how much water he used, or how much shampoo disappeared every week. But it started disgusting me. Not because of what he was doing, but because of how secretive and compulsive it felt. I tried to bring it up again more gently a few weeks later. We were having dinner, and I said, "I just want to understand, like, does it make you anxious if you can't shower after?" He sighed, rubbed his face, and said quietly, "Yeah, it's like I can't relax until I do. I know it's weird. My ex made fun of me for it all the time. That softened me a little." I reached across the table and said, "I'm not making fun of you. I just want to help you not feel trapped by it." He nodded, but I could tell he wasn't ready to have that conversation. Still, over the next few weeks, things got harder. Every sleepover, every weekend together, felt like we were living around his routine. Once we were in the middle of, being intimate, and he suddenly stopped, got up and said, "I have to shower first." I just sat there on the bed, naked and stunned, listening to the water running for 20 minutes. When he came back, he smiled sheepishly like nothing happened. That was the moment something in me cracked. I realized I couldn't pretend it was just a quirk. It was something deeper, something he wasn't ready to face. The last straw came when he stayed over during a plumbing issue in my building. The water had been shut off for repairs. I warned him ahead of time, and he said it was fine. But after using the bathroom once, he started panicking. I mean, full-on panic attack, pacing, sweating, saying, I can't handle this." I tried to comfort him, but he grabbed his stuff and left, saying he'd check into a motel for the night, just to shower. He texted me later apologizing, saying he knew it made him seem crazy. I told him it didn't make him crazy, but it did make me realize we weren't compatible. He called me, voice shaky, asking if I was breaking up with him. I said I didn't want to, but I couldn't keep building my life around his fear of being dirty. We ended things quietly. No big fight, no drama, just sadness. A few weeks later, Alyssa found me sitting on the couch staring at my phone. She asked if I missed him. I said, yeah, but I think I miss who I thought he was. I still think about him sometimes. How something so small can unravel something that seemed so perfect. How love can turn to discomfort without anyone meaning for it to. I hope he gets help someday, I really do. Because underneath all that anxiety was someone who cared deeply, who wanted to be good. But until he learns to live without scrubbing himself raw after every moment of being human, he's not really living at all. Update. My boyfriend's bathroom habits made me see him differently. It's been almost a year since I wrote that first post about Kyle. The guy I broke up with because of his extreme bathroom habits. I didn't expect so many people to relate to it or share their own stories about similar compulsions, hygiene anxieties, and partners who struggled with them. Reading those comments was both comforting and heartbreaking. It made me realize that what I thought was disgusting wasn't really about disgust at all. It was about fear, shame, and control. A few people asked me in messages if I ever talked to Kyle again. I hadn't, until a few months ago. It happened completely by accident. I was at a friend's engagement party. My college roommate Megan was getting married to her longtime boyfriend Eric. And the event was held at this small brewery downtown. I was standing by the bar, sipping on a cider. When I heard someone behind me say my name, I turned around, and there he was, Kyle. He looked almost exactly the same, maybe a little leaner, hair shorter, same shy half smile. My stomach dropped for a second. Not in a bad way, just in that familiar, oh God, it's you kind of way. We both froze, then laughed awkwardly. Hey, he said. Wow. You look great, I smiled. Probably too wide. You too, it's been forever. We stood there in that weird bubble of small talk for a bit. Jobs, mutual friends, the usual dance of catching up without getting personal. He told me he'd moved to another city for work and was visiting for the weekend. He also mentioned, kind of casually, that he'd started therapy. That caught me off guard. He said it like someone mentioning they'd joined a gym. Not heavy, not awkward, just matter of fact. I realized I had some stuff I needed to deal with, he said, glancing down at his drink. That thing you used to talk about? Me needing to shower all the time? Yeah, it wasn't really about hygiene. It was about control. I didn't know what to say. I just nodded, trying to stay calm. Because part of me wanted to hug him, and part of me still remembered all those nights of awkward silence and running water. He went on, turns out I have something called OCD, obsessive-compulsive disorder. It's not all cleaning and counting like people think. Mine was all about contamination fears. I didn't even realize how much it ran my life until you called it out. That hit hard. He said his therapist, Dr. Reynolds, had been helping him work through exposure therapy. Small steps to get comfortable being unclean without panicking. He told me the first time he used a public bathroom without showering afterward. He sat in his car shaking for 10 minutes. I didn't die, though, he said with a crooked smile. So I guess that's progress, we both laughed. And I felt this huge weight lift off my chest, like finally. The version of him I wanted to believe in was real again. Someone who wasn't ruled by fear. We ended up talking for almost an hour. Not about the breakup. That would have been too much. But about where we were now. I told him I'd started dating someone new, a teacher named Mark, and that I was finally in a place where I didn't feel like I was constantly managing someone else's emotions. He smiled and said, "Good, you deserve that." Then he added, "I'm sorry, for how bad it got. I didn't mean to make you feel trapped in my weird routine." I told him I understood, and I meant it. I wasn't angry anymore. We hugged goodbye before the night ended. And as I walked to my car, I realized I wasn't sad. I just felt peaceful, like that chapter had finally closed. A few weeks later, he texted me out of the blue. Nothing weird, just a thank you. He said something like, "You were the first person who didn't make fun of me. That mattered more than you know." I didn't reply right away. I sat on that message for a while because I didn't want to reopen something that was better left in the past. But eventually, I just wrote back, "I'm glad you're doing better. You deserve peace too," and that was it. Since then, life's been quiet in the best way. Mark and I have been together for about 7 months. He's gentle and funny, and the kind of person who folds my laundry without being asked. Sometimes I catch myself bracing for the next weird thing. The next hidden quirk that might derail everything. But then I remember that people can be different. Love can be different. I also started seeing a therapist myself, not because of Kyle, but because I realized I had my own patterns to break. Like confusing discomfort with disgust, or assuming I had to fix people to earn their love. My therapist, Dr. Collins, once said something that stuck with me. Compassion doesn't mean staying, it means understanding, and still choosing yourself. That sentence feels like the grown-up version of what I learned from all this. Sometimes when I think back on Kyle, I don't see the guy who made me cringe with his bathroom rituals. I see someone trying so hard to feel safe in his own skin, and failing, until he finally asked for help. And I'm proud of him for that. Even from a distance, the last thing I'll say, to anyone reading who might be dating someone like him, is this. It's okay to love someone who struggles. It's also okay to step away when their struggle starts swallowing you too. You don't owe anyone your peace, not even if they're good, not even if they're trying. Love should make room for both people to breathe. Kyle finally found his heir, and I think I finally found mine too. Final update, hey Reddit. It's been about 2 years since my last update, and almost 3 years since I wrote about Kyle, the ex-boyfriend whose bathroom habits completely changed how I see relationships, boundaries, and empathy. I didn't think I'd ever write another update, but something happened recently that brought all of it full circle. So, here we are again. After my last post, things with Mark kept going strong. He's one of those steady, grounding people who make you feel safe without even trying. We moved in together about a year ago, into this small but sunny apartment in Portland. It's nothing fancy. The kitchen faucet still leaks sometimes, and the neighbor's dog barks at shadows. But it's become our little haven. Mark and I are good, really good. But not because everything's perfect. It's because we've learned how to stay when things aren't. That's something I don't think I knew how to do when I was with Kyle. Anyway, earlier this year, I was out running errands when I bumped into someone unexpected at a bookstore. Alyssa, my old roommate. We hadn't seen each other in ages, so we grabbed coffee afterward to catch up. Somewhere in the middle of our conversation about work and life and how expensive everything's gotten, she said, "You'll never guess who I saw a few weeks ago." I didn't even have to guess. I just said, "Kyle?" She nodded. Yeah, he was with someone looked happy. For some reason, that hit me harder than I expected. Not in a jealous way, just emotional. Like hearing that someone who once shared your heartbeat had found a rhythm that worked for them again. Later that night, I told Mark about it. He didn't get weird or jealous or defensive. He just smiled and said, "Good. I'm glad he's doing okay." Then he kissed my forehead and went back to chopping vegetables for dinner. That small, quiet reaction meant everything to me. Because here's the thing. Love with Mark feels like breathing. It's simple, steady, and unforced. There's no panic, no guessing, no tightness in my chest. It's the kind of love that makes you realize how much energy you used to waste trying to manage chaos. A few months later, I actually did run into Kyle again. Totally by coincidence. At a friend's art show downtown. I almost didn't recognize him at first. He looked lighter, not in weight, but in energy. There was a calm around him that I don't remember ever seeing before. He saw me, smiled, and walked over. "Hey, stranger," he said. I smiled back. "Hey yourself." We talked for a while, about life, work, and how weird it felt to be in the same room again after everything. He told me he'd been seeing someone named Rachel for about a year, and that she'd been really supportive about his mental health journey. He said he still had OCD, but he'd learned to manage it instead of letting it run his life. He laughed and said, "I still shower too much sometimes, but at least now it's because I want to, not because I have to." I told him I was happy for him, and I meant it truly. We even joked about how wild it was that we both ended up better people because we broke up. He said, "You know, you were the first person who really made me look at myself instead of hiding behind the word hygiene." That kind of closure doesn't come often in life, but it felt good. Before we left, he said something that stuck with me. "You know, I used to think love meant finding someone who could handle all my weirdness. Now I think it's about finding someone who makes you want to face it." That line hit me like a gut punch. Because it's true. That night, when I got home, Mark was curled up on the couch, half asleep with a book in his lap and our cat Milo sprawled across his chest. I sat next to him, watched his chest rise and fall, and thought about all the ways love had evolved for me. It used to mean anxiety, overthinking, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Now it means peace, small gestures, and the freedom to be imperfect. A few weeks later, Mark and I drove out to the coast for a weekend getaway. One night, sitting by the fire pit, I told him the whole story. The one I'd only ever hinted at before. About Kyle, his OCD, the showers, the fear, the sadness. About how it broke me in ways I didn't even see at the time. When I finished, Mark didn't say anything right away. He just squeezed my hand and said softly, "You were compassionate, but you were also brave enough to walk away. That's a hard balance. I started crying. Not out of sadness, but because someone finally said it. For so long I'd felt guilty for leaving Kyle. Like I'd failed him somehow. But hearing that reminded me it wasn't cruelty. It was survival. That trip turned into one of those memories I know I'll keep forever. Not because of anything dramatic, but because of how normal it felt. We sat by the fire, the waves in the distance, and I finally felt like I was where I was supposed to be. A few months later, something small but meaningful happened. Kyle sent me a message. Not romantic, not nostalgic, just a simple thank you, he said. I know I've said this before, but I really mean it this time. You helped me more than you'll ever know. I hope you're happy. I didn't respond right away. I read it a few times, took a deep breath, and finally wrote back, I am. I hope you are too, and that was the end of it. Now, as I sit here writing this final update, Mark's in the kitchen humming some off-key song while making breakfast. Milo's trying to steal a pancake, and the morning sun's coming through the window just right. It's ordinary, and it's perfect. I still think about Kyle sometimes, but not with pain, more like gratitude. He was a mirror. One that showed me all the ways I needed to grow. If there's one thing this whole messy story taught me, it's that love isn't about how clean, perfect, or constant it looks from the outside. It's about the small, quiet moments of care. For yourself and for the person beside you. Sometimes walking away isn't the opposite of love. Sometimes it's what keeps the love pure. So yeah, if that 26-year-old version of me could see me now, she wouldn't recognize how calm I've become. But she'd be proud, I think, because I finally understand that real love, the kind that lasts, doesn't need to be proven. It just needs to be lived. Stories number 6. My girlfriend's bumper stickers almost got her killed, I swear. This whole thing sounds like something out of a bad TV drama. But it happened just last month, and I'm still trying to process how close it came to ending badly. I'm 29, and my girlfriend Hannah is 27. We've been together for about 2 years. She's the type of person who feels everything deeply. Passionate, outspoken, emotional in a good way and sometimes in a not-so-good way. She's the kind who cries during political documentaries and argues with people in YouTube comment sections. I love her to death, but sometimes her strong opinions spill over into real life in ways that make me nervous. One of those ways is her car. Her car looks like a rolling protest. I'm not kidding. She's got at least 10 bumper stickers on the back of her little blue Subaru. Most of them are political or activist-themed. Stuff like Save the Planet, Women's rights are human rights, and one that says no justice, no peace. None of it's hateful, but it's definitely loud. You can tell what side of things she's on just by looking at her car for 5 seconds. I've told her a few times that maybe it's not the best idea to advertise all that on the road, especially where we live. A small conservative town in Missouri where people fly flags bigger than their trucks. She always brushed it off, said she wasn't going to shrink herself to make others comfortable. And honestly, I respected that. Until last month, it was a Sunday afternoon. Around 4 p.m., I was at home watching football when Hannah called me, and the second I picked up, I knew something was wrong. Her voice was shaky, and she was crying so hard she could barely speak. I kept asking her what happened, but all she managed to get out was, "They tried to run me off the road." My heart just stopped. I grabbed my keys and told her to pull over somewhere safe. She said she was already parked in a gas station a few miles outside town. So I got there as fast as I could when I pulled up. She was sitting in her car with her hands still shaking on the steering wheel. I opened the door and she just broke down, sobbing into my chest. She wasn't hurt, but she was pale and trembling, and her coffee had spilled all over her jeans. Once she calmed down enough to talk, she told me what happened. She'd been driving home from visiting her mom, who lives about an hour away. Most of the drive is highway, long stretches of flat road with barely any exits. She said she noticed a black pickup truck behind her after she merged onto the interstate. At first, she didn't think much of it, but after a few minutes, she realized it was tailgating her every time she sped up. It sped up. When she slowed down, it did too. Then it pulled into the next lane and stayed right beside her. She glanced over and saw 2 guys in the cab, both wearing camo hats, laughing and pointing at her car. Then one of them held up a middle finger. She tried to ignore them and just focus on the road. But they started swerving closer, edging into her lane. She honked, but that only made them laugh harder. One of them leaned out the window and yelled something she couldn't make out. Then they suddenly sped up, cut in front of her, and slammed on the brakes. She swerved to avoid hitting them and nearly spun out. Her car fishtailed for a few seconds before she regained control. That's when she said she saw one of them pointing at the back of her car, at the bumper stickers. She managed to get around them and tried to exit at the next ramp, but they followed her off. That's when she called me. While she was talking to me, she pulled into the gas station and parked near the front door, where there were cameras and people around. The truck kept going after that. Hearing her tell it made my blood boil. Someone tried to scare her, or worse, because they didn't like her opinions on a piece of vinyl. I called the sheriff's office, but by the time a deputy showed up, the truck was long gone. We gave a description, but there wasn't much else to go on. He told us to file a report just in case, but he didn't seem to think they'd find them. After the officer left, we sat in her car for a long time. She kept saying she couldn't believe something like that happened over stickers, that she wasn't trying to provoke anyone. She just wanted to express herself. I told her I understood, but also that maybe it was time to think about taking some of them off. She got quiet when I said that. Not angry, just disappointed. She said, if I take them off, then they win. They get to silence me. I didn't have a good answer, because she's right, in a way. But I also don't want her ending up in a ditch because some angry stranger decided to make a point. Over the next few days, she jumped every time a truck got too close on the road. She'd call me after every drive, even short ones. She stopped taking the highway altogether. I noticed she started parking farther away from certain stores too, especially ones with big lifted trucks outside. It broke my heart to see her like that. Then, about a week later, something else happened. We were at the grocery store, and when we came back out, someone had stuck a note under her windshield wiper. It said, "Keep pushing your liberal trash around town and see what happens." No name, no signature, just that. That was the moment she finally took the stickers off. All of them. She peeled them off one by one while I stood there, holding the trash bag. She didn't say anything, but her eyes were wet the whole time. When she finished, the car looked bare, almost like it wasn't hers anymore. I wanted to tell her she did the right thing, but part of me hated that she had to. That people could intimidate someone into silence over something as harmless as a slogan. The next morning, she texted me a photo of her clean bumper and said, "It feels weird, like I erased part of myself." Since then, she's been quieter, still her, but less fiery. The kind of person who now looks over her shoulder before speaking too loudly in public. I hate that. I told her I'd help her get cameras for the driveway and a dash cam for her car. She agreed, though she joked that it makes her feel like she's living in a spy movie. But deep down, I know it's not funny. Someone tried to scare her into silence, and it worked. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if she'd lost control that day. How I might have been watching the game, waiting for a text, not knowing she was out there fighting for control of her car because of a stupid piece of plastic on her bumper. And the worst part? There's no justice for it. No one got caught. No one learned a lesson. They just gotta drive off laughing, probably feeling proud of themselves. Every time I see a car covered in bumper stickers now, I feel two things at once: admiration and fear. Admiration for people brave enough to keep showing what they believe in. Fear for what someone else might do about it. The world feels smaller now, meaner, and every time Hannah drives away, I watch her taillights until they disappear, hoping I never get another call like that again. Update. It's been almost 6 weeks since that day on the highway, and life hasn't really gone back to normal for us. Hannah's safe, thank God. But I can tell something inside her changed after it happened. At first I thought time would help her shake it off, get her confidence back behind the wheel, but the longer this went on, the clearer it became that she's still carrying it. She drives differently now, slower, more cautious, always checking her mirrors like she's expecting someone to come up behind her. I'll look over and see her gripping the steering wheel too tight. Sometimes she doesn't even realize she's doing it until I tell her to relax her hands. About a week after she peeled off the stickers, she told me she felt like she'd betrayed herself. That stuck with me. She said, "I used to feel proud of that car. It said something about me. Now it feels like I'm hiding, and I didn't know what to say." Because she's right. She is hiding, but for good reason. She almost died over a set of stickers. How do you tell someone to stand up for what they believe in when you've seen firsthand how ugly people can be? The police never followed up. We called the station twice, but they said there wasn't anything new to report. They never found the truck, no license plate, nothing. It's like those guys just disappeared. Then, 2 weeks ago, something new happened that shook both of us again. It was a Friday night. Hannah was closing up the bookstore she works at downtown. I was supposed to pick her up, but I got stuck at work for an extra 20 minutes. When I finally got there, I saw her standing outside the shop, arms crossed, looking pale. I rolled down my window and asked what was wrong. She pointed at the curb. Someone had keyed her car deep, jagged lines down the driver's side, and scratched into the paint in big shaky letters were the words, "Shut up, I swear." My heart dropped. It wasn't just vandalism. It felt targeted. We called the police again. They came out, took photos, asked if we had any enemies. Hannah told them about the truck incident, the note, the stickers. They wrote it all down, but I could tell they didn't think much would come of it. The officer even said, could be random vandalism, but it didn't feel random. Not after everything that happened. That night, Hannah broke down. She sat on my couch and cried for almost an hour, just saying, "Why do they hate me? They don't even know me." I didn't have an answer. I just held her and told her she didn't deserve any of it. The next morning, she called in sick to work. Said she couldn't look at her car without feeling sick. We got it towed to a repair shop, but she didn't even want to drive the rental they gave her. She said it felt like being watched. That's when I knew this had gone beyond just fear. It was trauma. A few days later, she started therapy. She told me her therapist said what happened wasn't just road rage or bad luck. It was a hate incident, an intentional act of intimidation. Hearing that made something inside me twist. Because that means there are people out there who think it's perfectly fine to terrorize a stranger for having different beliefs. Since starting therapy, she's been slowly finding her footing again. She still drives, but mostly sticks to back roads or errands close to home. She installed a dash cam and keeps pepper spray in her car. I used to think she was being overly cautious, but now I think she's being smart. One small thing that surprised me, she started putting new stickers on her car. Not political ones, but small, quiet things. A sticker of a sunflower, one that says, "Be kind." Another of a cat wearing sunglasses. When I asked her why, she said, "I need my car to feel like mine again, even if it's just in small ways." I think that's her way of reclaiming it. But here's the part that really messed with me. A few days ago, she got a message on Instagram from an anonymous account. No profile picture, no followers, it said. "Still spreading your trash? Maybe next time we'll finish the job." That message made my blood run cold. We reported it to the police again. They said they'd look into it, but we haven't heard back. I helped her tighten her privacy settings and change her passwords. We even set up a motion light outside her apartment. But the truth is, I can't protect her from every threat that hides behind a keyboard or a steering wheel. She's been trying so hard to act strong, to go to work, to see friends, to live like nothing's changed. But I can tell she's still scared. The way she looks around parking lots now, or how she jumps when someone honks too close behind us. She used to be fearless, the kind of person who would speak her mind no matter who was listening. Now she second guesses posting anything online that might draw attention. The other night, she said something that broke my heart. She said, "It's not just me, it's all of us. Everyone's so angry now. You can't even exist without offending someone." And she's right. I've always thought of myself as someone who doesn't scare easily. But this whole thing changed how I see people. How easily anger can turn into danger. How someone's pride or politics can outweigh another person's safety. I used to think bumper stickers were harmless, just words on a car. Now I see them like targets, because to some people, that's what they are. We're thinking about moving in together soon. Mostly because we want to feel safer, but also because I don't want her facing this alone. I told her that whatever happens, I've got her back. But I'd be lying if I said I don't think about that truck every time I see headlights in the mirror. I wonder if those guys ever think about what they did. Probably not. They got their laugh, their little moment of power, and went on with their lives. Meanwhile, Hannah's still afraid to take the highway. Sometimes, when she falls asleep on the couch, I look at her and think about how close it came to going the other way. One wrong move on that road, 1 inch closer to the edge, and I might have been getting a call from a state trooper instead of her. So yeah, she's safe. We're okay, but okay feels different now. It's quieter, smaller. And every time she drives away, I find myself standing in the driveway just a little longer, watching her taillights fade, hoping that the world she's driving into isn't as cruel as it's been lately. Final update: I didn't plan on writing again, but enough has happened since the last time that it feels like I need to get it out. It's been about 3 months now since the first incident, and somehow what started as a random act of road rage turned into something that's reshaped both of our lives. Hannah's better in some ways, worse in others. She's still in therapy every week, still jumps when trucks rev their engines, Still checks behind her twice before pulling out of a parking lot. But she's also started to push back against the fear in her own way. Right after that anonymous Instagram message, she deleted all her social media for a while. Said she didn't want to give anyone a window into her life. But after about a month, she came back. With one post. It was a photo of her car, parked by a lake, with the caption, "You don't get to take my peace." It got a lot of support. Friends, co-workers, even some strangers reached out with kind words. That post was her way of taking her voice back, even if just a little. Then about 2 weeks later, she decided to sell the car. At first, I thought she was being impulsive, but she explained it perfectly. She said, "It's like keeping a haunted house. Every time I get in that car, I relive what happened." She didn't want to keep patching it up or pretending it was fine. So, we sold it. We drove 3 hours to pick up a used Toyota Camry from a guy outside St. Louis. She picked a silver one. Clean, plain, no stickers, nothing flashy. On the drive home, she was quiet for a long time, then said, "This one's just a car, not a message board." That sentence hit me harder than I expected. She's not the same person she was before that highway incident. I think part of her innocence got taken that day. But she's learning to live with the new version of herself. Stronger, but more guarded. A few weeks after she sold the Subaru, we found out through a friend of a friend that someone had actually been bragging at a local bar about chasing some liberal chick off the road a while back. Apparently, one of the guys described it exactly. The blue car, the stickers, everything. The friend told us the names, and we passed them to the sheriff's office. It took a while, but the police finally followed up. They called Hannah in to make a statement, and she identified one of the men from a photo lineup. The deputy said they'd been questioned before for aggressive driving and harassment. It felt surreal hearing that. Like the people who made our lives hell were real. Not just shadows on the highway. Last week, one of them actually got charged with reckless endangerment. It's a misdemeanor, but still. There's something deeply satisfying about knowing there's at least a record of what they did. Hannah cried when she heard, not because she wanted revenge, but because someone finally believed her. After that, something shifted. She started sleeping better, laughing again. We went out to dinner last Friday. The first time in months, she didn't ask for a booth near the door. We're living together now. She moved into my apartment in early October, and even though it's small, it feels like a safe little world we built ourselves. We've got cameras by the door, and she's got a new morning routine where she journals with coffee before work. She says it helps her put the noise somewhere. A few nights ago, we were sitting on the balcony, talking about everything that's happened. She said, "I used to think fear meant weakness. Now I think fear's just the tax you pay for caring about things." I told her that made sense, because even after everything, she still cares. She still volunteers at the animal shelter. She still signs petitions. She still has strong opinions. She's just learned when and where to show them. Before all this, I didn't really get how fragile safety is. I used to think bad things happen to other people, or in other places. But fear has a way of shrinking your world, even when nothing physical changes. Now, every time she drives off to work, I still get that little knot in my stomach. Not because I don't trust her to handle herself, but because I've seen how quickly things can turn. How fast someone's statement can turn into someone else's nightmare. The craziest part? That small-town gossip travels fast, and word got around about those guys getting caught. A few of their buddies started complaining online about cancel culture and snitches. We saw the posts, but we didn't respond. Hannah just said, "Let them shout into the void. I'm done giving them my energy." And she meant it. The other day, we drove past that same stretch of highway where it all happened. It was her idea. I could tell she was nervous, but she said she needed to face it. We stopped at the same gas station she'd pulled into that day. She sat there for a while, looking out the window, then smiled faintly and said, "I'm still here." That simple sentence broke me a little, because yeah, she's still here, still driving, still living. People like those guys wanted to silence her, to scare her into being smaller, but she didn't disappear. She just got smarter, stronger, quieter in a way that speaks louder than before. We still don't put stickers on the new car. Not out of fear anymore, but out of choice, she says. If people want to know what I stand for, they can talk to me. That feels like growth. And as for me, I've learned that love isn't just being there for the good parts. It's standing steady when someone's world suddenly feels dangerous. It's holding them when the world gets ugly and saying, "You're safe now," even when you're not entirely sure it's true. So yeah, it's been a rough few months. But last night we drove home from a movie, The windows down, music playing, the sky wide open above us, for the first time in a long time. She didn't check her mirrors every few minutes. She laughed, really laughed. And it hit me how far she's come from that terrified girl sitting in a gas station parking lot. She's not the same, and neither am I, but maybe that's okay. Maybe that's what surviving something does. It doesn't fix you, but it rebuilds you into someone who knows what peace is worth. And I'll tell you this, I've never been more grateful for something as simple as watching her pull into the driveway. Safe, headlights cutting through the dark, coming home, stories number 7, skipping the family dinners. I never thought something as small as a monthly dinner could stir up so much guilt, resentment, and confusion inside me. But here I am, 31 years old, wondering if I'm the bad guy for finally stepping away from something that's been slowly draining me for years. For some context, I'm the oldest child in a very complicated family. My parents, Doug and Melissa, divorced when I was around 10. The split wasn't messy in the screaming, throwing things sense. It was quiet, cold, and distant. They just stopped trying one day. My dad was there at the breakfast table, reading the newspaper, and the next week, he was living in an apartment across town with a new girlfriend. That girlfriend, Tina, would later become his wife, and eventually, the mother of my half-siblings, Eli, Sophie and Caleb. They're 14, 12, and 9 now. I met Eli for the first time when I was 18. I'd just graduated high school, and my dad had invited me to a barbecue at his house. I remember standing in the doorway, holding a 6-pack of soda, feeling like a guest in what used to be my father's world. Tina was polite but distant. My dad kept saying things like, "We're one big family now." But I never felt that way. I was a visitor, a reminder of a life he'd already moved on from. Over the years, the distance grew. I still saw my dad, but it was always on his terms. Birthdays, holidays, quick lunches where he'd talk about his job, his new family, and then slip in a, "You should really come by more often." My mom remarried too, but her situation was different. Her new husband, Frank, was quiet and kind. He treated me with respect but didn't try to play dad. My relationship with my mom stayed solid, mostly because she didn't force things. Then came the dinners. About 4 years ago, when Eli turned 10, my dad started hosting these family dinners once a month. His idea was to bring everyone together, me, my mom, my stepdad, his wife, and all the kids. He said it would help the younger ones feel like a whole family. At first, I went along with it. I figured, fine, it's just dinner once a month. But from the very first one, I felt out of place. It was always at my dad's house. The walls were covered with family photos. His new wife, the kids, vacations, soccer games, not a single picture of me anywhere. I'd sit at the table while everyone caught up on inside jokes or talked about events I wasn't invited to. Tina would smile, offer me mashed potatoes, and then turn back to her kids. My dad would ask about work or my apartment, but never in a way that felt genuine. More like checking off a box. My mom and stepdad would make small talk with everyone, but even they seemed uncomfortable. Still, I kept going. Every month, because I didn't want to be the problem. That changed earlier this year. In February, I got a new job. I work in marketing for a small tech startup in Seattle. It's demanding, but I love it. It's the first time I've actually felt proud of where I am. When I told my dad, his first reaction wasn't, "Congratulations," or "I'm proud of you." It was, "You'll still make it to dinner next week, right?" I laughed it off, but that hit me harder than I expected. When I showed up that weekend, I was exhausted. My dad barely acknowledged my new job again, but he went on for 20 minutes about Eli's middle school science fair project. The rest of the dinner was the same old routine. Small talk, family stories that didn't include me, and that same dull ache in my chest that said, "You don't belong here." On the drive home, I sat in my car for 15 minutes, just staring at the steering wheel, wondering why I kept putting myself through it. The next month, I skipped the dinner. I texted my dad that work had been hectic and I needed some rest. He replied with a simple, "Okay." But then a few days later, my mom called. Apparently, my dad had told her he was disappointed in me. He said the younger kids were asking why I didn't come, and that I was hurting the family dynamic. That phrase, hurting the family dynamic, set me off, because for years that family dynamic hadn't included me. So I skipped the next dinner too, and the next, at first. I told myself it was temporary, that I'd go back once things settled down. But something in me shifted. I started spending my weekends doing things that made me happy. I'd go hiking with friends, visit new coffee shops, or just rest. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel that anxiety creeping in every time the second Saturday of the month rolled around. Then my dad called me out of the blue last month. He didn't even say hello, just, "What's going on with you? Why are you avoiding the family?" I told him I wasn't avoiding anyone. I just didn't feel comfortable at the dinners. I said it felt like I was watching a family that wasn't mine. He went silent for a moment, then said, "That's ridiculous. You are part of the family, you just don't try." That hit like a punch to the chest. I reminded him that I'd been trying for years. I'd shown up, smiled, and played along while he built a whole new life without me. He didn't like that. He said I was being selfish and immature, and that the kids missed me. I told him I loved the kids, but that I couldn't keep showing up to something that made me feel like a stranger. He hung up without saying goodbye. A few days later, Tina sent me a message on Facebook. She said she understood how I felt but asked me to think of the children, that maybe I could be the bigger person. I didn't respond. Then, out of nowhere, my mom got pulled into it again. My dad had called her to talk some sense into me. She called me crying, saying she didn't want to take sides but that maybe I should just go to keep the peace. That was when I realized I was done trying to keep the peace for people who didn't care about my comfort. It's been 4 months since I last went to a dinner. My dad and I haven't spoken since that phone call. My mom still talks to me. But there's always a layer of tension when his name comes up. The kids have texted me a few times, and I've replied, I don't want them to think I disappeared. I told them I love them and that I'd come visit soon, just not for dinner. Sometimes I wonder if I'm being cruel, if maybe I should have kept going, for the kids' sake, or to avoid the guilt. But then I think about how I felt sitting at that table, like a guest in my own father's house. And I remember why I stopped. I don't think anyone should have to keep showing up to something that only reminds them they don't belong. If family means forcing yourself to smile while your heart quietly breaks, then maybe family isn't always worth showing up for. I didn't stop loving them. I just stopped sacrificing myself to prove it. And maybe, for once, that's okay. It's been about 7 months since I stopped going to the monthly family dinners, and I didn't realize how much that choice would change things between me and my parents. I thought the dust would settle eventually, that my dad would cool off, maybe realize I wasn't skipping dinners out of spite. But that hasn't exactly been the case. After I posted about it, a lot of people told me to set boundaries, and I did. I told myself I'd only reach out to my dad when I wanted to, not when guilt pushed me to. At first it felt freeing. Every second Saturday of the month would roll around, and instead of feeling that tightness in my chest, I'd wake up and make plans, go for a hike, meet up with my friends Lauren and Matt for brunch, or just stay home and do laundry with music blasting. It was peaceful, but that peace didn't last long. Around May, my younger half-sister Sophie sent me a text saying she missed me. It was short and simple. Hey, we haven't seen you in forever. Are you mad at Dad? I stared at that message for a long time before answering. She's 12. She doesn't understand the layers of the situation. I told her no, I wasn't mad, that I just had a lot going on, but that I'd love to hang out with her soon. She sent back a heart emoji and said, okay, maybe next dinner? That broke me a little, because it's not her fault she was born into this weird dynamic. She didn't ask for any of it. None of the kids did, so I made plans to see her separately the next weekend. I picked her up and took her and Caleb to the zoo. It was honestly a great day. They were so excited to see the giraffes, and we got ice cream after. It was easy, comfortable, no tension, just siblings having fun. For the first time in a while, I felt connected to them. Of course, my dad found out. He called me that night, sounding irritated but trying to keep his voice calm. He said, I heard you took the kids to the zoo. That's great, but why didn't you tell me? I told him I didn't think I needed to. He said it wasn't about permission, it was about communication, that he should have been involved since it concerned his family. That phrase again, his family. Like I'm some outsider looking in through a window. I told him I didn't want to make the kids feel like they were missing out on me, but I also wasn't comfortable at those dinners anymore. He said, you're making this harder than it needs to be. We argued for a bit. He went on about how family isn't convenient, and I said that it also shouldn't be forced. He said something that stuck with me though. He said, you've always had one foot out the door when it comes to us. That one hurt, because maybe there's some truth to it, but I also feel like he never left the door open for me to step fully in. After that, we didn't talk for about 2 months. I'd text the kids here and there, but nothing more. Then, in late July, my mom called me. Apparently, my dad had told her he was done trying with me. He said, if she wants to be part of this family, she knows where to find us. The weird part? I didn't feel anger when she told me. I just felt tired. But things took a turn in August. I got invited to Eli's 15th birthday party. It wasn't at the house. It was at a local park. So I figured maybe it'd be easier, less tense. I bought him a new basketball. He's obsessed with the NBA. And I decided to go the second I walked up. I could feel the awkwardness in the air. My dad looked surprised to see me, like he didn't expect I'd actually show. Tina gave me a polite smile but didn't say much. The kids were thrilled I came, and that honestly made it worth it. I played a bit of basketball with Eli and helped cut the cake. Then, about an hour in, my dad pulled me aside. He said, I appreciate you coming, but you could have reached out first. We've been trying to move on as a family, and it's confusing for the kids when you show up sometimes and disappear other times. I just stared at him. I wanted to scream, move on as a family? Like I was an old memory, not his daughter. I told him I wasn't trying to confuse anyone. I was trying to be there for my siblings in the way I could. He said, the way you could? Or the way you want to? That conversation didn't end well. I left before the party was over. I didn't even say goodbye to Tina. I cried in the car for a while before driving home. The following week, Sophie texted me again asking if I was mad at Dad. I told her no, and that adults just have disagreements sometimes. She said she wished everyone could just eat dinner and be normal. That hit me hard. Because in her eyes, it's just a dinner, but to me, it's years of history, hurt, and pretending. Now it's October and things are distant. My dad hasn't called. I know he's still having those dinners. My mom goes, my stepdad goes, and from what she's told me, they've learned not to talk about me there. Which is fine by me. I've started therapy since then. Something I should have done years ago. My therapist, Angela, said something during one session that's been stuck in my head. You're not obligated to keep showing up in places where you're unseen. That's not family. That's performance. That sentence felt like someone turned on a light inside me. I still text the kids. I send Sophie little doodles I make at work, and Caleb videos of my cat chasing a laser pointer. Eli and I play basketball at the park every now and then. Those moments, small as they are, feel real. And that's what I want now, real connection. Not the kind that gets forced over mashed potatoes and fake smiles. Sometimes I still feel guilty. Sometimes I wonder if I should have just kept going, faked my way through the discomfort, kept the peace. But then I think about how calm my life feels now. And I know I made the right choice. I might not be at the dinner table, but I'm not missing out on family. I'm just choosing the parts that actually love me back. It's been a little over a year since I stopped going to my dad's family dinners. And honestly, this past year has been the most emotionally clarifying time of my life. A lot has happened since that last post. Some good, some painful. But all of it has finally helped me understand where I fit in this strange patchwork family of mine. Not long after my last update, something unexpected happened. My dad had a heart attack. It wasn't major, what the doctors called a mild myocardial infarction, but it was enough to scare everyone. My mom called me in tears that night, and even though I hadn't spoken to my dad in months, my first instinct was to go to the hospital. I got there around midnight. The hallways were quiet, just the low hum of machines and distant voices. When I walked into his room, Tina was sitting beside his bed holding his hand. My siblings were asleep in the corner, curled up on those uncomfortable hospital chairs. My dad looked smaller somehow, vulnerable in a way I'd never seen him. When he saw me, he looked surprised, but not angry, just tired. I didn't say anything at first. I just walked over and sat down. He squeezed my hand and said, "Didn't think you'd come," I told him. "You're still my dad." He nodded, eyes glossy, and whispered, "I'm sorry." I didn't know what exactly he was apologizing for. The dinners, the guilt trips, the distance. But it didn't matter in that moment. We just sat there, quiet, the machines beeping softly. He was in the hospital for about a week. During that time, something shifted between us. The walls came down a little. I helped Tina bring food, stayed with the kids while she ran home, and even chatted with my mom and stepdad when they visited. It was strange seeing all of us, this patchwork family, in one place. No pretending, no forced smiles, just people trying to keep someone they love alive. When he was discharged, I went over to help them settle in. The kids were ecstatic to have him home. He thanked me for helping out, said, "You didn't have to." And I said, "I wanted to." That was probably the most honest moment we'd had in years. Over the next few months, we started talking more. Not just about family stuff, but real things. He asked about my job, my friends, my apartment. I think being close to death made him realize how much time he'd wasted trying to script togetherness instead of just letting it happen naturally. One night we were sitting in his backyard, me, him, and Eli. Watching the fire pit glow, he said, "You know, I used to get so angry thinking you were pulling away, but maybe you were just protecting yourself." That was the first time he'd ever admitted that. We talked for hours that night about how hard it was for him after the divorce, how he'd built this new family but never really figured out how to blend the old one into it. He told me he knew I felt excluded and that he regretted not trying harder to make space for me that wasn't just performative. I cried, he cried, and for the first time, it didn't feel like we were on opposite sides of something. After that, I started seeing the kids more often again, but on my terms, not at the family dinners, not as a background guest, but as their big sister. I'd take Sophie to art classes on weekends, help Eli with basketball tryouts, and play video games with Caleb when I visited. They'd still talk about the family dinners, but it didn't feel like I was missing out anymore. It felt like I was choosing my own way to be present. Eventually, Tina reached out to me too. She invited me to grab coffee one afternoon, and I almost said no, but curiosity won, to my surprise. It wasn't awkward. She said she'd always felt that I kept my distance, and she hadn't known how to bridge that without stepping on toes. She admitted she used to feel defensive, like she had to protect her family space. But she realized now that I wasn't a threat. I was just trying to belong somewhere. That conversation meant more to me than I expected. It didn't erase the past, but it made me see her differently, not as the woman who replaced my mom, but as someone who'd been trying to hold together something messy and fragile. As for the dinners, they still happen. Once a month, same as always. But the difference now is, I get invited, and I don't feel obligated. Sometimes I go, sometimes I don't. When I do go, it's easier. There's laughter. There's warmth. My dad still has his corny family speeches, but they don't sting anymore. I can smile and actually mean it, and when I don't go, there's no guilt. My dad will just text, "Missed you tonight. Love you." That's it. No manipulation. No, you're hurting the dynamic. Just love. I think the truth is, I needed to step away for everyone to see that family isn't about showing up to prove something. It's about choosing to show up because you want to. My mom and I are still close. She's been quietly proud of how I've handled all this. Frank, my stepdad, actually came with me to visit my dad a few weeks ago, and it was weirdly fine. Two men who once felt like rivals just talking about lawn care and football. Life really does soften people with time. Now, a year later, I finally feel like I belong. Not because I forced myself into a chair at a dinner table, but because I carved out a place that feels honest. My dad still slips up sometimes, tries to schedule family closeness, but he's learning, and so am I. I used to think walking away meant giving up on family. Now I realize it just meant giving us all a chance to rebuild without the weight of pretending. Last weekend, I was at my dad's house for a barbecue. Not a family dinner, just a casual afternoon. Sophie was showing me her new sketchbook. Eli was teasing Caleb about missing a layup. Tina was grilling, and my dad came up behind me, handed me a drink, and said quietly, "I'm glad you're here." I looked around and said, "Yeah, me too." And for the first time in a long time, I meant it. Stories number 8. My boyfriend completely changed after I made a stupid joke about my ex. So this happened a few months ago, and honestly, I've been trying to make sense of it ever since. I 29F have been dating this guy, Tyler 31M, for almost a year now. Things started off amazing, like movie-level chemistry. He's funny, grounded, affectionate, and has this way of making me feel safe even when life feels chaotic. Before him, I was in a long-term relationship with my ex, Aaron. We were together for about 4 years, and while it started off strong, it ended really badly. Aaron cheated, lied, and somehow still managed to make me feel like I was the one who ruined everything. I spent a long time untangling my self-worth from the mess he left behind. When I met Tyler, I wasn't even looking for something serious, but he was different. Patient, sweet, emotionally intelligent, the kind of guy who remembers your coffee order and texts you when he gets home just so you know he's safe. I fell for him slowly, which, to me, felt safer than falling fast. Everything was great, until that night we were in bed, just joking around after, being intimate. It was one of those silly, giggly moments that couples have when you're half tired and a little too comfortable. He made some teasing comment about being better than anyone else I'd been with. which was very obviously a joke. I laughed and said something like, "Well, you and Aaron are about the same size, so it's hard to compare." The words left my mouth before my brain could catch up. The second I said it, the energy in the room changed. Tyler froze. The playful smirk disappeared. I could feel the air shift, like someone had turned down the temperature 10 degrees. I immediately realized how bad it sounded. I tried to backtrack, saying, "Oh my God, that came out wrong. I just meant, like, it's not about that," but it was too late. He got quiet, really quiet. After a few seconds, he said, "So, you think about your ex when we're in bed?" My stomach dropped. "No, I don't. It was just a dumb comment. I wasn't thinking about him. I'm sorry." He didn't yell or anything. He just nodded and said, "Okay," then got up, grabbed his phone, and left the room. I sat there for a while, staring at the ceiling, feeling like I'd just detonated a bomb in my own relationship. For the next few days, things were off, not explosive, just distant. He wasn't mean or cold, but there was this unspoken awkwardness. We still texted, still saw each other, but something fundamental had shifted. The easy rhythm between us was gone. I tried bringing it up a few times, but he'd just say, "I'm fine. Don't worry about it." But I did worry, a few weeks later. During dinner at this little Italian place we love, I finally pushed the issue. I said, "Ty, I know I hurt you. Can we please talk about it?" He set down his fork and looked at me for a long time before saying, "It's not just what you said. It's what it meant." I frowned. "What do you mean?" He said, "You compared me to someone who hurt you. Someone who still lives rent-free in your head enough that you can bring him up during something that's supposed to be ours." I know it was an accident, but it made me realize I might be trying to fill a space that isn't empty. That sentence broke me, because deep down I knew he wasn't wrong. I hadn't thought about Aaron romantically in forever, but apparently, he still lived in some dusty corner of my brain. I'd spent so long processing that relationship, replaying it, analyzing it, that pieces of it were still lingering in the background. Ghosts in my emotional hard drive. After that dinner, we didn't break up immediately, but things changed. Tyler started pulling back, and I could feel him doing it, even though he never said it out loud. It wasn't vindictive. It was protective, like he didn't want to be the guy who had to compete with my past. Even subconsciously, I tried everything to fix it, apologizing, giving him space, planning small surprises, showing him how much I cared. But you can't force comfort, and you can't unsay something that plants a seed of doubt. One night, about a month later, we were sitting on his couch watching some dumb action movie. During a commercial break, he turned to me and said, "You know, I really wanted this to work." My heart sank. "Me too." He nodded slowly, then said, "But I don't think I can be with someone who makes me feel like I'm part of a comparison chart." I cried. A lot. He held me for a while, and then he walked me to my car. We both knew that was it. That drive home was brutal. I replayed that stupid, thoughtless sentence over and over. How could one moment undo something that had felt so real? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized it wasn't just that moment. It was what it symbolized. That comment was a tiny window into something bigger, that I hadn't fully let go of my past, even if I thought I had. I'd been carrying invisible weight, and Tyler just happened to bump into it. A few months passed. I didn't date anyone. I started therapy again. My therapist, Nancy, told me something that stuck. We don't compare people because we still love the old one. We compare them because we're still afraid of repeating the same story. That was it. That was me. I wasn't hung up on Aaron. I was terrified of ending up with another Aaron. Tyler was nothing like him, but my brain was still wired to measure safety against past pain. Eventually, I texted Tyler to apologize one more time, not because I expected anything, but because I wanted him to know how much I understood now. I wrote something like, "I know I can't take back what I said, but I want you to know I've learned from it. You didn't deserve to be compared to anyone. You were your own person, and I didn't treat that with the care it deserved. I really hope you find someone who never makes you feel like that." He replied a few hours later, "Thank you. I'm glad you're doing okay. You deserve good things too." And that was the last time we talked. It's been almost a year since then. I've been single, and honestly, it's been good for me. I'm finally not haunted by my ex. I'm not afraid of the next person being a repeat of the past. I've learned to leave room for someone new to exist without shadowing them with old ghosts. I still think about Tyler sometimes, about how kind he was, how patient, about how one careless joke cracked something that might have lasted. But more than anything, I think about how that moment forced me to face myself, to really look at what I was still holding on to. I don't hate myself for it anymore, I just know better now. Because love isn't about erasing your past. It's about knowing how to keep it from spilling into your present. And sometimes it takes one painful, stupid, irreversible mistake to finally learn that update. It's been about 10 months since that story. The one where I lost a really good man over one careless sentence. Honestly, I didn't plan to ever write an update, but life has a funny way of circling back, especially when you think you've moved on completely. After things ended with Tyler, I threw myself into therapy and my work. I needed to prove to myself that I could be okay alone. No relationship detox, no rebound, just space. I started going on hikes again, spending weekends with friends I'd neglected, cooking real meals instead of living off takeout. It felt grounding. I kept thinking about that night, not as a heartbreak story, but as a moment that forced me to grow up emotionally. For a while, I thought I'd never be able to date again without overthinking everything I said. But slowly, something shifted. It happened during a random Saturday afternoon. I was at a flea market with my best friend Claire, rummaging through old books and mismatched mugs. When she said, "You seem lighter lately," I laughed. "Lighter?" "Yeah," she said, squinting at me. "Like you finally stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop." She was right. For the first time in years, I wasn't scared of being left or compared or misunderstood. I'd finally accepted that my worth wasn't tied to how perfect I could be in someone else's eyes. A few weeks later, I matched with someone on a dating app, a guy named Noah. Normally, I'd have ignored the message, but his profile was weirdly charming. His bio said, "Recovering people pleaser, loves dogs, dislikes raisins." That made me laugh out loud. We started talking, and it was easy, effortless. But this time, I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I wasn't scanning his messages for hidden meanings or potential red flags. I was just being on our first date. We went for coffee, and halfway through our conversation, I caught myself thinking, he reminds me of no one, and I can't even describe how freeing that felt. Over the next few months, things with Noah just unfolded naturally. He was funny in a dry, understated way, the kind of humor that sneaks up on you. He was also very straightforward. No games, no cryptic texts. The first time we slept together, I caught myself holding my breath afterward, waiting for that weird wave of self-consciousness to hit. But it didn't. Instead, he just reached over, brushed my hair out of my face, and said, "You look like your brain's running a marathon. Relax." And for once I did. The thing is, after Tyler, I promised myself I'd never compare anyone to anyone again. Not out loud, not in my head. So even when my brain tried to make connections, "Oh, Noah does this thing kind of like Aaron used to," I shut it down, because this wasn't about history anymore. This was about presence. One night, about 3 months into seeing Noah, we were lying on his couch watching reruns of Parks and Rec, and he turned to me and said, "You know what I like about you?" I said, "That I laugh at all your bad jokes." He smiled. "That too, but mostly that you seem honest, like you're actually here, not still halfway somewhere else." That hit me harder than I expected, because he didn't know the story. At least not yet, but somehow he could see the result of it. A few weeks later, I did tell him about Tyler, about the comment, about the fallout. I was terrified it would make him look at me differently. But he didn't flinch. He just said, "Everyone's got that one moment they wish they could rewind. The important thing is, you didn't stay stuck there." That was when I realized I'd really healed. Then, out of nowhere, Tyler reached out. It was just a short text. "Hey, saw your post about volunteering at the shelter. That's awesome. Hope you're doing well." It threw me off, honestly. We hadn't spoken since my apology message. I sat on that text for 2 days before replying. "Hey, thanks. I'm doing really well. Hope you are too," he responded an hour later. "I am. I'm seeing someone. She's great. Thought you'd want to know I'm happy." I smiled when I read it. Because I was happy for him, really? The weird tension I used to feel whenever I thought about him was just gone. That night I told Noah about the text, and he just shrugged. "Sounds like you both needed to go through that to find better versions of yourselves." And he was right. A few months later, Noah met my friends, including Claire. Afterward, she texted me, "I like him. You look settled. Not like you're performing." It's such a small word. Settled. But I think that's what healing really looks like. Not fireworks or grand closure speeches, just a quiet kind of steadiness. So yeah, it's been almost a year since that one awful night. I don't hate that version of me anymore. She was clumsy with her words, but she was trying. She was learning how to stop using comparison as a shield. Now, I'm with someone who doesn't make me feel like I have to measure anything. Not love, not comfort, not worth. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that the worst mistakes can still teach you the best lessons. You just have to stay long enough to listen, sometimes. The biggest apology you can make isn't to another person. It's to yourself, for all the ways you didn't know better. And finally I do. Final update. Hi again, Reddit. It's been 3 years since my last post. 3 years since I told the story about the worst sentence I ever said, and how it changed the way I see love, forgiveness, and myself. I didn't think I'd ever be back here. Life moved on, I moved on, but recently, something happened that tied everything together in a way I never saw coming, and it felt right to come full circle. So, here's the final update. The ending that, in a weird way, started the day I made that stupid joke to Tyler. Noah and I are still together. We live in Seattle now, in a small townhouse with creaky stairs and too many plants. He got a job offer out here about a year ago, and we decided to make the move together. It was scary, not because of him, but because it meant fully committing. It meant building something that wasn't just working for now, but ours. And I'll be honest, I was terrified of screwing it up again. But Noah, being Noah, made it simple. The first night in our new place, surrounded by boxes and takeout containers, he looked around and said, "If this all burns down tomorrow, I'll still be glad we tried." That sentence has become our quiet mantra. It reminds me that love isn't about guarantees. It's about intention. A few months after the move, I got a message from a number I didn't recognize. It just said, "Hey, this is Tyler. I hope this isn't weird, but I wanted to say thank you." My heart skipped, not out of longing but surprise. I hadn't heard from him in years. I texted back, "Hey, it's been forever. What's going on?" He told me he was engaged to Rachel, the woman he'd started dating after me. He said he'd been cleaning out some old files on his laptop and found an old photo of us from a weekend trip we'd taken to Vermont. He said it made him think about how that time in his life, even the messy parts, helped him grow into someone capable of the kind of love he has now. Then he said something I'll never forget. "I used to think that comment you made meant you didn't respect me, but now I realize it just meant you didn't know how to love yourself yet. And I didn't either. We were both trying to feel whole in the wrong ways." That message floored me, because he was right. At 29, I thought I was healed just because I wasn't crying over my ex anymore. But I hadn't done the real healing, the part where you stop punishing yourself for not being perfect. I thought love was about never saying the wrong thing, never showing insecurity, never reminding someone that you have a past. But it's not. It's about being seen, flaws and all, and still choosing each other anyway. After reading his message, I sat in silence for a long time. Noah was in the kitchen making coffee, humming something off-key. I just watched him move around the kitchen and thought about how far I'd come. There was a version of me who thought one bad sentence could ruin everything forever. There was another version of me who thought she had to earn forgiveness to deserve peace. And then there's the version sitting here now. The one who finally understands that mistakes don't define you. What you do afterward does. A few weeks later, Noah proposed. It wasn't some elaborate surprise. We were at a friend's cabin in Oregon, sitting by a fire after hiking all day. He handed me a mug of hot cocoa, and when I looked down, there was a ring sitting at the bottom of the cup. I burst out laughing and said, "Did you just propose with hot chocolate?" He smiled and said, "I figured you'd rather have that than champagne." He wasn't wrong. When we told my family, my mom cried. My dad opened a bottle of wine, and my best friend Claire screamed so loud I thought she'd break my phone speaker. But the best part? I sent Tyler a message that just said, "Thank you for your text. You were right. I didn't love myself back then, but I do now," he responded. That's the best ending I could have hoped for. We didn't keep talking after that. It didn't feel necessary, but it was closure. The kind that doesn't hurt. Our wedding was small, 35 people. In a garden overlooking the water, Noah's brother Eli officiated. It was simple, full of laughter, and surprisingly peace. There was no grand cinematic moment, just us. Exchanging vows we wrote ourselves, in mine, I said, "Thank you for never making me feel like I had to compare love to what it used to be. Thank you for teaching me that real love doesn't need measuring. It just needs choosing." After the ceremony, I went outside for a moment alone. The air smelled like rain and roses, and I just stood there, thinking about every version of myself that got me here. The girl who said the wrong thing, the one who cried in her car, The one who finally stopped apologizing for growing, because all of them led me to this one. Now when I look back, I don't cringe at that old story anymore. I don't replay it like a mistake I wish I could undo. I see it as a hinge. A single, messy moment that opened a door to everything that came after. Tyler found peace, I found mine. And for the first time in my life, I stopped measuring anything. Love, growth, worth, it all finally feels infinite. So yeah, Reddit. This is my last update. I'm 33 now, married, not perfect, but honest, and sometimes, when Noah teases me or I trip over my own words, I just laugh and think, thank God I learned how to stay when things aren't perfect. Because that's where the real love lives. Stories number 9. He says I should put him before my studies. I've been dating Tyler for almost a year now. We met during my freshman orientation at the University of Michigan. He was a sophomore volunteer. One of those people who always seems comfortable talking to anyone. I remember him showing me where the student union was and joking that I looked too serious for a first year. I liked him right away. He had this easy confidence I envied. At first, it was perfect. We'd grab coffee before my classes, study together in the library, and walk around campus late at night. He'd tell me about his econ lectures and plans to start a business someday. And I'd talk about my pre-med classes and how terrified I was of organic chemistry. He was proud of me for being ambitious, he'd say. You're gonna be the doctor in our friend group. I'll be the guy bragging about dating a doctor. It felt supportive, even sweet. But that started to change around the middle of the second semester. My schedule got brutal. I was taking 14 credits, volunteering at the student clinic twice a week, and working 20 hours at a coffee shop to cover my books and rent. I was constantly exhausted. I started canceling plans, skipping parties, and saying no more often. That's when he started making comments like, "You never make time for me anymore," or, "You act like school is your boyfriend now." At first, I brushed it off. I figured he was just feeling left out. But one night, after I told him I couldn't hang out because I had a lab report due, he said, "You can't put me on hold every time something academic comes up. Relationships take priority too, you know." That line stuck with me. I didn't want to be the kind of girlfriend who neglects her partner, but I also didn't think it was wrong to focus on my degree. I told him I was trying my best, but he said, "Trying isn't enough when I'm always second." It got worse over time. He started keeping score. If I stayed up late studying, he'd point out that I didn't text him back for hours. If I hung out with classmates after lab, he'd accuse me of making time for everyone but him. Once, when I mentioned I was thinking of applying for a summer research internship, he actually got mad. "So you're choosing to spend your summer working instead of with me?" he asked. I didn't even know how to respond. I was speechless. The next day, I tried to explain how important that internship could be for med school applications. He said, "You talk about your future like I'm not in it." That one hurt. I started second-guessing everything. If I studied too much, I felt guilty. If I skipped studying to hang out with him, I felt anxious. It became a lose-lose situation. I found myself constantly apologizing just to keep things calm. One weekend, he invited me to visit his parents' lake house. I said I couldn't go because I had an anatomy midterm that Monday. He sighed and said, "You always have an excuse, you know. Not every successful person sacrifices their relationship." That was the first time I got angry. I told him that I wasn't sacrificing anything. I was building something. He said I was being dramatic. We ended up not talking for 2 days. When we finally did, he came over with flowers. He apologized but followed it with, "You just have to learn balance, babe. I want to be your priority too." The word priority started feeling like a trap. A few weeks later, I was studying in the library when he showed up unannounced. I hadn't told him I was there, and he just walked up, dropped into the chair next to me and said, "Surprise." He had takeout and said we could eat while I studied. I told him I appreciated it, but I really needed to focus. He got quiet and said, "If I didn't come find you, I wouldn't see you at all." That night, I realized how suffocating it was becoming. My roommate Kayla started noticing too, she told me. "You've stopped smiling when you get texts from him." She wasn't wrong. Every message from him started with, "Why haven't you?" or "When can I?" It was exhausting. The breaking point came during finals week. I was running on caffeine and 3 hours of sleep. Tyler called wanting to grab dinner. I said I couldn't, that I had one more exam to prep for. He snapped and said, "You care more about a stupid test than me." Something in me broke right there. I told him, "Yeah, right now I do, because that stupid test is my future." He hung up. We didn't talk for 2 days, and honestly, I felt a strange sense of relief. I finally had quiet. I could breathe when he finally texted me. It was a long message about how relationships should come before career obsession, and that I'd regret not putting effort into the person who loves you most. I reread it twice, then deleted it. He came to my dorm later that week. Wanting to talk, I told him I wasn't sure we were compatible anymore. He looked stunned. He said, "You're throwing away everything over school?" And I told him, "No, I'm keeping everything I've worked for." He didn't take it well. Said I was selfish, that I'd changed. Maybe I did. But I think that's what college is supposed to do. It's supposed to change you. After he left, I cried. Not because I regretted it, but because I finally realized how much I'd been carrying. The next morning, I woke up early, went for a run, and grabbed coffee by myself. It felt strange but freeing. When I sat in my lecture hall that day, I realized something. I didn't feel guilty for being there. For the first time in months, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. It's been about a month since the breakup. He still texts occasionally. Things like, "I miss you," or "I hope you're happy with your books." I don't respond. I don't hate him. I think he genuinely believed he loved me, but he wanted a version of me that wasn't real. A version that revolved around him. Now, I'm focusing on myself. I applied for that summer internship. Got it, actually. My parents are proud, and Kayla's already planning our move-out road trip. And sometimes, when I walk across campus at night, I think about how close I came to giving up pieces of myself just to make someone else feel important. I won't make that mistake again, because the truth is, love shouldn't ask you to shrink, not for anyone. Update. It's been about 6 months since I broke up with Tyler. And if I'm honest, this has been one of the most confusing, liberating, and exhausting stretches of my life. I didn't plan to post again, but a lot has changed. Some things for the better. Some I'm still figuring out. When I wrote that first post, I thought the breakup was the end of the story. But it turns out, endings aren't as clean as they seem. Tyler didn't take the breakup well. At first, he'd send texts every few days, little ones like, "Hope you're sleeping okay," or "I saw your favorite coffee shop's hiring again." I ignored them. Then the tone started shifting. He'd write things like, "You're cold," or "You'll regret throwing away someone who cared." It was unsettling, but I kept my distance eventually. I had to block him on everything. I didn't want drama. I just wanted space to breathe and figure out who I was without him in my orbit. At the same time, I was deep into the summer research program I'd worked so hard to get. It was at a hospital in Chicago. Clinical shadowing. Lab work, the kind of thing I used to dream about. I rented a tiny studio near the L train. The first night, I lay on the futon, exhausted but so proud for the first time. I wasn't doing something to prove myself to anyone. I was doing it because I wanted it. I met a lot of great people there. There was one girl, Megan, who became a close friend. She was a year ahead of me and had gone through something similar with her ex. A guy who couldn't handle her ambition. One night we sat on her apartment floor eating takeout, and she said, "They tell you to be independent, but the second you are, people call you selfish." That line has been stuck in my head ever since. Around week 4 of the internship, I got an email from a mutual friend saying Tyler had been asking about me. I didn't respond, but it messed with my head for a few days. There was a time when that kind of attention would have made me feel wanted. Now it just felt heavy. It wasn't until late July that I realized how much lighter my life had become without all the emotional balancing I used to do. I'd wake up, grab a coffee, walk to the hospital, come home tired but satisfied. No guilt. No explaining why I cared about my goals. Just me, my work, and quiet evenings reading on the balcony. Then one afternoon, out of nowhere, I ran into Tyler. I was back in Ann Arbor for a weekend to visit my roommate, and I stopped at the campus bookstore. He walked in wearing that same gray hoodie he always wore freshman year. My stomach dropped. He saw me instantly and came over. He looked different. Thinner, a little more tired. We made small talk, awkward and polite. He asked how I'd been. I told him about the internship. He nodded but didn't really look me in the eye. Then he said, "I read your post." Apparently, a mutual friend had shown him my Reddit story. I froze. I didn't know what to say. He said, "You made me sound like the bad guy," I told him. "You weren't the bad guy. You just weren't right for me." He sighed and said, "I didn't realize how controlling I was being until after you left. I thought I was fighting for you." It was weirdly honest, and maybe for the first time, I believed he meant it. He apologized, not in a dramatic way, just quietly, like someone admitting something to themselves. I told him I appreciated it. We talked for a few more minutes, and then he said, I hope you get wherever you're trying to go." That was the last time I saw him. After that, I felt something click into place. It wasn't anger or nostalgia. It was peace. I think sometimes you have to see the person again to know you've really let go. Since then, my life's been surprisingly good. My grades are strong, and I just got accepted into a mentorship program with a surgeon at the hospital. My parents came up last weekend to help me move into a new apartment closer to campus. My mom kept saying how proud she was of me for staying focused, and it made me tear up a little. The funny thing is, now that I'm out of that relationship, I've started seeing how much I used to shrink myself without realizing it. I'd mute parts of my personality just to avoid conflict. I'd apologize for being tired, for being busy, for having dreams that didn't leave room for someone else's comfort. I don't do that anymore. Don't get me wrong. It's not like I've sworn off relationships forever. I still believe in love. I just know now that it should add to your life, not pull from it. Last week, Megan and I went to a concert downtown. On the way back, we got caught in the rain. We ran laughing through the streetlights, drenched and out of breath, and I had this sudden thought, this is what it's supposed to feel like. Not anxious, not guilty, just alive. Sometimes, I still think about how different things could have been if I'd kept putting him first. Maybe I would have dropped that internship. Maybe I would have let go of med school. Maybe I would have spent another year trying to make him feel secure at the cost of my own happiness. But I didn't, and that's what I'm proud of. I think a lot of women my age get told that putting yourself first is selfish. But it's not. It's self-respect. There's a big difference between being cold and being clear about what you want out of life. Tyler once told me I'd regret choosing my studies over him now, looking at where I am. I can say with total honesty, I don't regret a thing. I'm still young, still figuring everything out. But I've learned that love should never demand that you shrink your world. The right person will stand beside you, not in your way, and for now, that person is me. Final update. It's been almost a full year since everything with Tyler ended, and reading back on my old post feels like opening a time capsule from a version of myself I barely recognize. I was still shaky back then, trying to sound sure of my decisions while secretly wondering if I'd made a mistake. Now, I know I didn't. Not even close. A lot has changed since that summer. I'm halfway through my sophomore year now, and life feels fuller than it ever has. Not easier, just fuller. I still have late nights in the library, coffee-fueled mornings, and stretches of exhaustion that make me question my sanity for choosing pre-med. But there's a quiet sense of confidence now that I didn't have before. I know why I'm doing it. I know what it costs, and that I'm willing to pay it. The funny thing is, this story started with Tyler telling me I should put him first and my studies second. Now, my studies have led me to places that would have never fit into the version of life he wanted for us. Last semester, I got selected for a mentorship program with a pediatric surgeon named Dr. Lawson. She's one of those people who's both terrifying and inspiring, the kind of person who commands a room without raising her voice. On the first day, she told me, "You can't heal people if you don't know how to protect your own boundaries." It was like she'd read my entire past year in one sentence. Working with her has completely changed how I see my future. I thought I wanted to do research, but now I want to be in the operating room. Watching her balance intensity and compassion is the first time I've ever seen what real purpose looks like in another person. Outside of school, my world feels lighter. Kayla, my old roommate, is still one of my closest friends. She jokes that I graduated from people-pleasing rehab. She's not wrong. I don't flinch when I say no anymore. I don't justify my time or explain why I can't go out. I've learned that I don't owe anyone constant access to me. I also started seeing someone new. Though it's nothing serious, his name's Evan. We met during a volunteer shift at the hospital. He's studying mechanical engineering, and somehow manages to be both laid back and ambitious at the same time. The biggest difference between him and Tyler is that Evan never makes me feel guilty for caring about my goals. If anything, he encourages it. When I told him about staying up all night prepping for a presentation, he showed up the next day with breakfast sandwiches and said, "Future doctors need fuel." Simple, easy, no conditions attached. I didn't realize how much I'd miss that kind of peace, but I'd be lying if I said I never think about Tyler every once in a while. Something small, a song, a spot on campus, a text from an unknown number will stir a memory, not in a painful way anymore, just in that quiet, distant kind of way where you recognize how far you've come. A few months ago, I actually ran into his mom at a local farmer's market. She remembered me immediately. She was kind, asked how I was, said Tyler had transferred schools apparently. He's working part-time and taking business classes somewhere closer to home. She said he's doing better, that he learned a few things the hard way. I smiled and wished him well through her. Afterward, I walked home thinking about how much energy I used to spend trying to be everything to someone who didn't know how to meet me halfway. It's not that he was awful. He just wanted love to mean dependence. I've learned that the healthiest version of love is two whole people walking side by side, not one person carrying the other. My younger self didn't understand that yet. She thought love meant constantly proving you cared enough. Now, I think love means trusting that you don't have to prove it all the time. When I look back, I don't feel bitterness anymore. Just gratitude for the lessons, for the heartbreak. Even for the nights I cried on my dorm floor wondering if I'd messed everything up. Those moments forced me to figure out who I am without anyone else's expectations weighing me down. This past weekend, I gave a short talk for a group of incoming freshman volunteers. They asked how I managed to balance everything: school, work, and personal life. I told them something that surprised me as I said it. You can't balance everything at once. You just decide what deserves your best energy, and what can wait. That's what I've learned this year. Not how to do it all, but how to stop apologizing for the things I choose to prioritize. Sometimes I think about how different my life would look if I'd listened to Tyler. If I'd stayed, maybe I'd still be tiptoeing around someone else's insecurities, trying to convince him that my ambition wasn't a threat. Maybe I'd be planning summer trips instead of scrubbing into surgeries. Maybe I'd be smaller, but I didn't stay. I chose myself. And because of that, I get to stand in an operating room, see someone's heartbeat on a monitor, and realize I'm on the path I always dreamed about. The girl I was a year ago thought she had to choose between love and success. The woman I'm becoming knows that the right kind of love, whether it comes from another person or from within, never forces you to make that choice. I'm not sure what's ahead. I know there'll be new challenges, new heartbreaks, maybe even new versions of the same lesson. But I feel steady now, grounded, sure of the fact that the only thing I'll never compromise again is myself. If there's anyone reading this who's stuck in that same place I was, feeling like you're being asked to shrink just to make someone else feel secure, please listen to me. You are not selfish for wanting a life that's yours. That's not neglect, that's growth. And sometimes, choosing yourself is the most loving thing you can do for everyone involved. So yeah, I guess this is my real ending. Not a sad one, just honest. I'm still here, still studying, still building the life I want, one long night and one small win at a time. And this time, no one's asking me to put that second. Stories number 10. My brother's last summer changed everything for me. When people talk about losing someone, they always mention the day it happens. The hospital room, the phone call, the silence afterward. But what they don't tell you is that the real heartbreak comes before the end. It's in the slow realization that time isn't infinite. That one day, the person you've known your whole life will be gone. And all you can do is watch it happen. My brother Tyler was 17 when he died. I was 19. He'd been sick for a long time. Leukemia, the kind that comes in waves. There'd be months where he seemed fine, laughing, eating, living like any other kid his age. And then suddenly, the next wave would hit, and he'd be back in the hospital, hooked up to IVs, pale as paper, trying to be strong for everyone else. We grew up in a small town in North Carolina, the kind of place where everyone knows your business before you even tell them. Our parents, Mark and Susan, did their best to hold things together. But cancer doesn't just attack the body. It attacks the whole family. It turns every day into a waiting game, every smile into a maybe. Tyler and I weren't always close. Before he got sick, we fought like any siblings do. He'd steal my stuff, I'd rat him out, we'd yell, then go back to normal like nothing happened. But once the diagnosis came, everything changed. It's strange how fast resentment disappears when you realize someone might not be around much longer. His first round of chemo was brutal. He lost his hair, his appetite, and the light in his eyes that made him Tyler. I remember sitting with him one night, the TV flickering in the dark room, both of us too tired to talk. He turned to me and said, "Do you think it's weird that I'm not scared?" I asked him what he meant. He said, "I think I've just accepted it. Like, I'm not fighting to live forever. I'm fighting to live long enough." That stuck with me. Long enough? As if he knew time was a luxury he'd never afford. The doctors tried everything. Chemo, radiation, even a stem cell transplant. There were brief moments where it looked like he'd beaten it. He went to prom, graduated high school, and even got accepted into UNC. Mom cried when the letter came in. He held it up like a trophy and said, "Guess they'll have to deal with me." That summer, the one before college, was the best and worst of our lives. Tyler made a list, his living list, as he called it. Not a bucket list because, as he said, buckets are for the end. I'm still living. It had simple things. Go fishing one more time, see a concert, drive to the beach, watch the sunrise with me. We did every single thing on that list. He couldn't walk long distances anymore, so when we went to the beach, I carried him piggyback down to the water. He laughed the whole way, shouting, "You're my Uber." We sat there for hours, the ocean washing over our feet, talking about everything. Life, love, and what comes after. He said, "If I don't make it, promise me you'll do something worth remembering. Don't waste your time," I promised. I didn't know then how much that promise would haunt me. By the end of July, he was back in the hospital. This time, the treatments weren't helping. The cancer had spread to his lungs. His breathing got worse. The doctors told us it was a matter of weeks. The night before he passed, I stayed in his room. He couldn't talk much anymore, but he squeezed my hand and whispered, "Don't be sad for me. Be proud." I told him I'd always be proud. He smiled, weak but real, and said, "Then I did something right." He died early the next morning. Peacefully, they said. I was there. I held his hand until the monitor went silent. I didn't cry right away. I just sat there staring at him, trying to memorize every detail. His freckles, the curve of his jaw, the faint scar on his chin from when he fell off his bike at 10. It didn't feel real. He was only 17. 17 years on Earth, and then gone. The funeral was packed. Everyone from our town showed up. Teachers, friends, people who barely knew him. The pastor talked about how Tyler fought bravely, how he never gave up hope. But that wasn't true. Tyler didn't fight because he was brave. He fought because he wanted to live. To laugh, to see another sunrise, to have one more cheeseburger with too much ketchup. Afterward, I couldn't stand being in that house. Everywhere I looked, I saw him. His shoes by the door, his old video game controller on the coffee table, his smell lingering in the hallway. I left for college a month later, not because I wanted to, but because he would have hated me staying behind. He wanted me to live, to go out there and do something worth remembering. I struggled for a long time. Depression hit hard. There were days I couldn't get out of bed, days where the guilt was heavier than my own body. Survivor's guilt is a cruel thing. It makes you feel like you stole time that wasn't yours. But then, one morning in March, I was walking across campus and saw a flyer for a local charity run for leukemia research. I signed up without thinking. During the run, halfway through, when my lungs burned and my legs wanted to quit, I heard Tyler's voice in my head. "You don't have to live forever. Just long enough." That became my mantra. Since then, I've run every year in his memory. I even started a small scholarship fund in his name. The Tyler Grant for Resilient Youth. It's not much, but it helps kids who fought through illness to chase their dreams. Mom and Dad visit his grave every Sunday. I go whenever I can. Sometimes I bring flowers, sometimes just silence. I sit there and talk to him. About life, about how much I miss him, about how I'm still trying to live long enough. Last summer marked 5 years since he passed. I went back to that same beach where we watched the sunrise. I brought his old baseball cap with me and placed it in the sand. The sky turned orange and pink, the waves calm, and I swear for a second, I could almost hear him laughing. "Proud of you," I imagined him saying. And maybe, just maybe he was, because even though cancer won in the end, Tyler still lived on his own terms, 17 years on Earth. But he left more impact than most people do in 70. And I guess that's the thing about loss. You never really say goodbye. You just learn to carry the echo of someone you love and somehow keep walking. It's been almost 2 years since Tyler passed, and in some ways, the grief has become a constant background hum in my life. Not sharp, not unbearable, but always there. I've learned that living after loss doesn't mean moving on completely. It means carrying the person you loved with you while figuring out how to keep walking. After that first year, I focused a lot on the scholarship I started in Tyler's name. It began small, just helping one kid cover some school supplies, but it quickly grew. Now, it's helping 5 or 6 kids every year. Teenagers battling illness, just like Tyler did. There's something incredibly grounding about seeing their faces, hearing their stories and knowing that his short life is creating real impact. Running has become my therapy too. I started training for marathons. Not to compete with anyone, but to push myself in memory of him. When my legs scream and my lungs burn halfway through a run, I can almost hear his voice in my head cheering me on. Don't stop. You've still got miles to go. It's motivating in a way that nothing else ever has been. My parents, Mark and Susan, are coping differently. Dad still struggles with guilt. I think he's more attentive now, calls more often, and tries to talk about Tyler without choking up. Mom has become a volunteer at the same leukemia center where Tyler was treated. She says helping other families keeps his spirit alive in some way. I see my friends differently too. Jake, my college roommate, has been incredible through all of this. He doesn't try to fix the grief. He just sits with me in it. Sometimes that's all you need. Someone to say, I'm here, even if everything else is gone. One of the hardest things has been seeing Tyler's friends navigate life without him. High school reunions, college milestones, birthdays, moments he'll never get to experience. I try to be there for them too. I host a small gathering each year on the anniversary of his death. It's informal, a few friends, some food, stories, laughter and tears. We remember him, the goofy things he did, the songs he loved, the dreams he had. That night, it's like he's in the room with us. I've also started writing about him. Essays, letters, reflections. Sometimes I just write him a letter like I used to when he was sick. It helps to pour all the thoughts I can't say aloud onto paper. I've been thinking about compiling it into a book someday, not just to remember him, but to help others who've lost siblings or kids to illness. The hardest moments still catch me off guard. A song on the radio, a smell that reminds me of him, a hospital billboard for children's cancer. It hits, and I feel the sharpness all over again. But I've learned to breathe through it, to let the sadness wash over me and then let it go. Tyler's life was short, but he left me with the tools to handle grief without letting it destroy me. This past summer, I took a solo trip to the mountains, the kind of trip Tyler would have hated. He didn't like bugs, didn't like tents, didn't like mosquitoes, but I went anyway. I carried his favorite baseball cap in my backpack and left it on the summit of a mountain we'd always joked about hiking together. It felt like leaving a piece of him in the world, a marker that said he was here and he mattered. I still miss him every day. Some days it's a dull ache. Other days, it hits like a lightning bolt. But the grief has shaped me. It's made me more patient, more compassionate, more willing to cherish every moment. I've started volunteering with kids at hospitals, teaching them things they like, painting, sports, even gaming, anything to make their stay a little brighter. Tyler would have loved that, seeing other kids smile despite being sick. Mom tells me I've grown a lot since his passing. Dad says he's proud of how I've carried myself. And me? I know Tyler would be proud too. Not because I'm perfect. Not because I've erased the pain, but because I've chosen to live, to create, to love, and to honor him every single day. I think about him constantly, and I know I always will. But I've come to realize that his death didn't just take him away from me. It gave me a perspective on life that I could never have gained otherwise. I live fully now, fiercely, for him and for myself. Every sunrise, every laugh, every small victory. It's a tribute to him. 17 years on this earth, and yet he changed mine forever. I carry him in everything I do, and somehow that keeps him alive. It's been almost 3 years since Tyler passed, and I've reached a point I never thought I would. A fragile kind of peace. Not because the grief has gone away. It hasn't, and I don't think it ever will. But because I've learned how to live with it, to carry it without letting it define me. Tyler is always with me. But now he feels less like a shadow, and more like a quiet presence guiding me. The scholarship fund in his name has grown steadily. What started as helping a few kids cover school supplies is now assisting several families with medical bills, tutoring, and even extracurricular activities. I've started working with the Leukemia Center to organize an annual Tyler's Day, a day of fun, games, and workshops for kids currently in treatment. It's exhausting, emotionally draining, but also incredibly rewarding. Every laugh, every smile, every small victory is a reminder that Tyler's life continues to make a difference. Running has become a ritual for me. I signed up for my first marathon last year, and during the training, every mile felt like a conversation with him. I remember him telling me once that life isn't about how long you live, but how deeply you live now. Each run, each push past exhaustion, is me living deeply, and feeling like he's cheering me on from somewhere beyond. College has been a strange mix of progress and nostalgia. Some days, I still feel the weight of his absence. Especially when I see kids my age laughing with siblings or friends in ways I'll never share with him. but I've found solace in sharing his story with classmates, friends, and even professors every time I speak about him. It feels like keeping a part of him alive, giving others a glimpse of the person he was. Family relationships have shifted too. My mom, Susan, has thrown herself into volunteer work, helping other families navigate childhood cancer. Dad, Mark, and I have rebuilt a tentative but genuine bond. We don't talk every day, but when we do, it's honest, unfiltered, and sometimes raw. He's apologized in ways he never could before, acknowledging his guilt, his mistakes, and his regrets. I've forgiven him, not because I had to, but because holding on to anger would have kept me from living the way Tyler wanted me to. The kids, Tyler's friends, our extended family, and even the ones he never met, remain an essential part of my life. I mentor some of them, organize small meetups, and make a conscious effort to be present. It's like carrying a piece of Tyler forward in every interaction, making sure his compassion, his humor, and his fight continue to ripple outward. Grief still hits unexpectedly. I see his favorite sneakers at a store. A song he loved comes on the radio, or I smell the faint scent of his cologne on an old hoodie. But now, instead of breaking me, these moments remind me of him in a comforting way. A presence, a memory, a life well lived, albeit too short. This past summer, I traveled to the beach where we watched the sunrise together the last summer he was alive. I carried his baseball cap, placed it in the sand, and watched the waves. I spoke to him aloud for the first time in years, telling him about college, the scholarship, the runs, the kids I've helped, and the friends I've made. I told him I was living as he would have wanted me to. The strangest thing happened as the sun dipped below the horizon. I felt a warmth wash over me, a sense of completion and continuity. I don't know if it was him or just my mind finally making peace, but I could almost hear him saying, "You did it. I'm proud. Life has gone on." I've had moments of happiness I never imagined I could feel after such a loss. Small victories, personal growth, new relationships, and even love. And through all of it, Tyler remains the lens through which I view the world. A reminder to live fully, love fiercely, and cherish every fleeting moment. I still cry sometimes, especially at night when the world is quiet. But those tears are no longer only for the loss. They're also gratitude, remembrance, and acknowledgement of a bond that death cannot sever. Tyler's 17 years on Earth weren't enough for the world, but they were more than enough to change mine forever. The truth I finally learned is that saying goodbye isn't about ending the connection. It's about learning to carry someone with you in every heartbeat, every decision, every step forward. Tyler may be gone, but he has never truly left. He lives in the scholarship kids, in every mile I run, in the laughter I share, and in the way I strive to live a life that honors him. I will never stop missing him. But I've learned that the love and lessons he gave me can transcend the pain. Cancer won the battle, yes, but it did not win the story. Tyler's life, short as it was, will continue to ripple outward through every choice I make, every act of kindness, and every moment I choose to live fully, just as he would have wanted. And in that I find peace. Stories number 11. My husband wants me to cut off my best friend after a horrible accident, but I can't do it. I never imagined I'd be writing something like this, but I need to get it off my chest. It's been months, and my marriage is hanging by a thread because of something that wasn't even malicious. Just tragic, random, and so painfully unfair. I, 34F, have a 6-year-old daughter named Lily and a husband named Matt. My best friend, Jake, has been in my life since college. We met when we were both broke and miserable at a campus coffee shop. I was crying over a failed midterm, and he was sketching cartoons on napkins. We bonded instantly. He's been like a brother to me ever since. When I married Matt 8 years ago, Jake was my man of honor. Matt and Jake got along, though not in a super close way. Matt used to joke that Jake was like our family's golden retriever. Always cheerful, always around, always willing to help. Jake's also the kind of person who shows up when Lily was born. He was there at the hospital with flowers and a stuffed rabbit. When Matt's dad passed away, Jake was at the funeral holding Matt's shoulder through the whole thing. When my mom had cancer, he took care of our dog so I could stay at the hospital. He's just that person. So when we needed someone to watch Lily one Saturday last spring, because our sitter canceled last minute and we both had commitments, asking Jake felt natural. He'd babysat plenty of times before. Lily adored him. He was her Uncle Jake. That day changed everything. From what I was told later, Jake took Lily to the park. It was a warm day. and there was this big jungle gym she loved climbing. He said she wanted to show him how fast she could go across the monkey bars. She slipped. She fell awkwardly, landed on her arm, and broke it badly. It wasn't a small fracture, it was a compound break. She screamed. People rushed over. Someone called 911. Jake rode in the ambulance with her, crying the entire time. When I got the call, I was in the middle of a client meeting. I don't even remember leaving the building, just running, grabbing my keys, trying not to vomit. At the hospital, Lily was crying, scared, covered in sweat and tears. Jake was sitting outside her room, white as a sheet, shaking. His hands were bloody from holding her when it happened. The moment I saw him, he started sobbing and saying, "I'm so sorry." I looked away for 1 second. I hugged him. I didn't even think, I just hugged him, because I knew he didn't mean for it to happen. He adored Lily. He would have traded places with her if he could, but Matt, he didn't see it that way. He was furious, beyond furious. He didn't yell at Jake, not at first, but I could see it building. He was stiff, cold, barely spoke a word to him. After Lily's surgery, which went well, thank God, Matt told me flat out, "I never want him near her again." I tried reasoning with him. I said, "It was an accident." But he cut me off. He was supposed to watch her. That's his one job when he's babysitting. 1 second of not paying attention, and she's screaming in an ambulance. The way he said it, the disgust in his voice, made my stomach twist. Jake texted every day after that, checking on Lily, asking if he could visit, offering to pay hospital bills even though we had insurance. Matt wouldn't let him come over. He said if I let Jake see her, he'd take Lily to his parents' place for a while. It became this horrible standoff. Between my husband and my best friend, Lily's recovery was slow but steady. She still has a small scar and a faint fear of climbing things, but she's okay now, physically at least, emotionally. I'm not so sure. The part that hurts most is that Jake hasn't forgiven himself, I can tell. Even months later, he still texts me every few weeks. "How's my little buddy doing?" He sends her gifts, art supplies, books, little cards. I can't give them to her openly because Matt gets angry, so I keep them in a drawer. It feels wrong to hide kindness. One night after Lily went to bed, I told Matt I'd met up with Jake for coffee. I didn't want to lie, but he deserves to know. He went silent, then said, "I can't believe you do that to me," I said. "Matt, he didn't do it on purpose," he snapped back. "I don't care if it was an accident. You don't leave a kid alone on a jungle gym." I asked if he'd ever made a mistake as a parent. He said, "Not one that broke our daughter's bones." That cut deep. Jake's been part of my life for over a decade. He's been there through everything. My lowest points, my biggest milestones. Losing him feels like cutting off a piece of myself. But Matt can't even hear his name without tension filling the room. It's gotten to the point where if I mention Jake, he'll just say, "You're choosing him over your family." And that's not what this is. I'm choosing compassion. I'm choosing to not throw away someone who made one tragic mistake. But maybe that's naive. A few weeks ago, Jake came by my office unexpectedly. He just wanted to drop off a small watercolor painting he'd made of Lily's favorite stuffed rabbit. He said, "Tell her I miss her," when I got home. I tried to show it to Matt, hoping maybe he'd soften. But he wouldn't even look at it. He said, "You're disrespecting me every time you talk to him," I asked. "What would you want him to do? Disappear?" He said quietly, "Yeah, I would. I haven't been able to stop thinking about that. I love my husband. He's a good father. He's protective, steady, responsible. But I can't bring myself to treat Jake like a criminal for something that wasn't intentional. He's already punishing himself enough. Every time I talk to my therapist, Dr. Karen, she tells me the same thing. You're grieving two things at once. Your daughter's safety being shaken, and the loss of peace in your relationships." And she's right. I'm exhausted. Sometimes when I put Lily to bed and she hugs me with her good arm, I just cry quietly, because I wish none of this had ever happened. I wish I didn't have to choose between the person I married and the friend who's been like family. But the truth is, I can't hate Jake. I just can't. And maybe that makes me the villain in my husband's story. But if compassion is a flaw, then I'll own it. Because I've seen what guilt does to good people, and I refuse to let it destroy another one. Update. It's been 6 months since I wrote that post, and honestly, reading it back now feels like hearing a ghost version of myself. I can remember exactly how I felt that night. Torn, angry, heartbroken, confused. But I didn't realize then just how far things would unravel, or how much I'd have to rebuild afterward. So here's what happened. After I wrote that post, things between Matt and me kept deteriorating. It wasn't a screaming, plate-throwing kind of breakdown. More like a slow suffocation. Every conversation about Jake turned into an argument, and every silence afterward felt like a wall growing higher. Matt started sleeping on the couch. It wasn't some dramatic "I'm done with you" gesture. He said he just needed space. But that space got wider every day. Meanwhile, Jake completely backed off. He stopped texting. No more gifts. No random check-ins. It was like he vanished. I think he finally realized that his presence, even from a distance, was making my life harder. I thought maybe that would help. That if he disappeared, Matt and I could heal. But instead of fixing anything, it just left a hollow space between us where our friendship used to exist. I tried to focus on Lily, her recovery, her happiness, her therapy appointments. She sees Dr. Evans, a child therapist, once a month. He's amazing with her. She's been doing so well physically, but sometimes she wakes up from nightmares, crying that she's falling again. It breaks my heart every time. Matt has been great with her through all that. Patient, gentle, steady, but when she brings up Jake, which she still does sometimes, I can see his whole body tense up. One night she asked, "Mommy, when can Uncle Jake come play again?" Matt froze. I told her softly, "Not for a while, sweetheart." She looked at me, confused, and said, "Did he get in trouble?" And that just shattered me, because to her, Jake isn't the man who made a mistake. He's her friend. The one who made silly voices and brought her art sets and watched cartoons with her. She doesn't see the blame. She just misses him. That night, after she went to bed, I told Matt I didn't want Lily growing up thinking people are disposable, that she shouldn't believe one mistake erases love, he said. She should learn that actions have consequences, I said. So does holding on to anger. He didn't answer. We started therapy soon after that. Couples therapy with Dr. Reese, who's a saint for even trying to mediate our sessions. The first few times were brutal. Matt sat with his arms crossed, jaw clenched, saying almost nothing. I cried through most of it. Eventually, Dr. Reese asked him something that seemed to actually land. She said, "If this had happened while you were watching her, would you want to be treated the same way you're treating Jake?" He didn't respond at first. Then he said, "I wouldn't forgive myself either." That was the first real crack in the wall. After that, things slowly shifted, not drastically, but small steps. He stopped snapping when Jake's name came up. He started listening when I talked about my feelings instead of shutting down. Then one afternoon, out of nowhere, Matt came into the kitchen holding an envelope. Inside was a painting, the watercolor Jake had given me months ago, the one of Lily's stuffed rabbit. I'd kept it tucked away in my desk because I couldn't bring myself to throw it out. Matt set it down and said, "I think she should have this." I cried so hard I couldn't even thank him. We gave it to Lily that evening. Her face lit up when she saw it. She said, "Uncle Jake made this?" "He remembers my bunny," Matt smiled. Small, tight, but real. It was such a tiny moment, but it meant everything. I didn't rush to call Jake or anything like that. I didn't want to force it, but a few weeks later, I ran into him completely by accident at a local bookstore. He looked thinner, quieter, but still him. He saw me, froze, then said softly, "Hey." We ended up talking for an hour in the cafe area. He told me he'd started volunteering at a children's art therapy program, partly as a way to cope, partly to do something good with all the guilt he's been carrying. I told him Lily still keeps the little cards he made for her. He got teary. Before we parted ways, I told him, "She forgives you, and one day, maybe Matt will too." He nodded but didn't say anything. He just hugged me, gently, like he wasn't sure he had the right, and whispered, "Thank you." I didn't tell Matt right away. I needed to process it myself first. When I finally did, he just said, "Did it help?" I said, "Yeah, it did." And for the first time in months, he reached across the table and held my hand. We're still in therapy, we're still healing. There are days I still catch him staring at Lily when she climbs something, like he's waiting for her to fall again. There are days I still feel torn in two, but there's also progress. Real, painful, slow progress. A few nights ago, I overheard Lily talking to Matt while they were watching TV. She said, "Daddy, are you mad at Uncle Jake?" He hesitated, then said, "No, baby, I'm not mad anymore." And I had to step into the hallway and cover my mouth because I started crying. It doesn't mean we'll ever go back to how things were. Some things can't be undone, but I hope, we're learning that forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about refusing to let that one moment define everything else. And maybe someday Jake will come over again. Maybe Lily will get to see her Uncle Jake without tension in the air. For now, I'm holding on to the fact that compassion didn't destroy my family. It might have actually saved it. Final update. It's been just over a year since everything happened. Since the accident. Since my marriage nearly broke apart. Since I thought I'd lost one of the most important people in my life. Writing this feels strange, almost surreal. I've been rereading the older posts I wrote back when everything was raw and bleeding. And it's like seeing an earlier version of myself who didn't know how things would end. Someone trying to hold her life together with shaking hands. But I'm still here, and so are they. Lily turned 7 a few weeks ago. We threw her a small birthday party in our backyard. Just family. Some neighborhood kids and her classmates. There were balloons, a bounce house, a mountain of cupcakes, and the kind of chaos only a bunch of sugar-hyped kids can create. And for the first time in over a year, Jake was there. It still feels wild to type that. Getting to that point took time. A lot of it. After my last update, things between Matt and me kept improving. Therapy helped, but honestly what helped most was just time. We learned to stop making every moment about the accident. To stop seeing guilt in every conversation, slowly. Lily's broken arm became just another scar in a story. Not the headline of our lives. About 3 months ago, I told Matt I wanted to see Jake again. Properly this time. Not just running into him by accident. I expected him to tense up, to shut it down. But instead, he just nodded and said, "I figured this day would come." I asked if he'd be okay with Jake seeing Lily. He didn't answer right away, but then he said, "If she wants to and if you trust him, then yeah." I almost started crying right there. I reached out to Jake that same week. He sounded nervous on the phone, tentative, careful. Like he was afraid I was calling to tell him to stay away again. But when I asked if he'd like to come by for dinner, he got quiet, then said, "Are you sure?" I said, "I am." The night he came over, I swear I could hear my own heartbeat. Matt had grilled chicken and corn on the cob, trying to keep things normal. Lily was practically bouncing when she saw Jake at the door. She ran straight into his arms. No hesitation, no fear, just pure joy. Jake's face crumpled. He hugged her so carefully. Like she was made of glass. The first half hour was awkward, honestly. Matt was polite but distant. I could feel him watching every move Jake made, but Jake never pushed. He just talked to Lily about school and art and her favorite cartoons. She showed him her drawings. She's really gotten into painting. And he told her they were way better than his when he was her age. At one point, Lily went inside to grab her sketchbook, and it was just the 3 of us sitting there in silence. Jake finally said quietly, "I know I can't say sorry enough times." Matt looked at him for a long time, then said, "I know." That was it. No forgiveness speech, no dramatic moment, just that. But it was enough when Jake left that night. Matt shook his hand. It wasn't warm, but it was something. After that, Jake started coming around occasionally. Not often. Just enough that it didn't feel like walking on glass anymore. He's still working with the art therapy program, and he actually started teaching weekend workshops for kids. He invited Lily to one last month, and Matt said yes, without me even having to ask. When she came home afterward, her hands were covered in paint and glitter, and she said, "Mom, Uncle Jake said I'm an artist." I think my heart grew 3 sizes that day. Matt still has moments. I can tell the memory of that day will always linger somewhere deep, but I've also seen him change. There's a softness in him now that wasn't there before. The kind that comes from surviving something together and realizing you can come out stronger. Sometimes he and Jake will even talk one-on-one. Nothing deep, just small talk about sports, work, whatever. But seeing them side by side, the man who loves me and the man who's been like my brother, feels like healing in physical form. And me? I've learned that forgiveness doesn't mean pretending nothing happened. It's not erasing the pain. It's carrying it with you until it doesn't weigh you down anymore. A few nights ago, after Lily was asleep, Matt and I sat outside with a glass of wine. The cicadas were buzzing, the air thick with summer. He looked at me and said, "You were right. Holding on to anger just made everything hurt longer." I told him I never wanted to be right. I just wanted peace. He said, "We have that now." And I think he's right. There's one last thing I want to share. Last week, Lily brought home a painting from Jake's class. It was of a park, bright blue sky, green grass, and a playground in the distance. In the middle, there was a little girl with brown hair and a man holding her hand. She told me, "That's me and Uncle Jake, see? I'm not scared of the playground anymore." I hung it up in our hallway. Matt didn't say a word about it at first, But later that night, I found him standing there looking at it. He just smiled and said, "She's brave." And that's when I realized, maybe we all are. We went through something awful, something that could have broken us completely. But somehow through patience, forgiveness, and time, we found our way back to something better. Not perfect, not the same as before, but better. Jake is family again. Not in the same way, maybe not as often, but he's there. And Matt and I are stronger than we've ever been. Sometimes I think about how 1 second, one slip, changed everything. And how, in another sense, it changed nothing at all. Because the love was always there. It just took a long, messy road to remember what really matters. So if anyone reading this is holding on to anger or guilt, or resentment, I hope you let yourself believe that people can come back from hard things. That compassion doesn't make you weak. It makes you whole. 'Cause it saved me. It saved all of us. Stories number 12. I don't know how to tell her it's just not working anymore. I've been seeing this girl, Riley, for about 5 months. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party in Nashville. She was funny, confident, a little chaotic in a way that made her interesting. I just started my second semester of college, and honestly, I wasn't looking for anything serious. But she had this energy that pulled me in. The first few weeks were great. She'd send me memes at 2 a.m., call me nerd when I stayed up studying, and drag me out for milkshakes or late-night drives when I got too stressed. We'd talk for hours about random stuff, music, books, how we both hated small talk. It was fun, easy. She made me laugh when I was taking everything too seriously. But then something shifted. It started small. She got really into TikTok trends, like really into them. At first, I didn't care. It was cute seeing her excited about things. But then it became constant. Every time we hung out, she'd pull out her phone mid-conversation to show me some video or explain a new core. She started speaking almost entirely in online slang, half of which I didn't even understand. I'd be telling her about my anatomy class, and she'd interrupt with, "That's such NPC behavior." Or I'd mention a professor and she'd go, "He sounds like he's got riz but no lore." At first I laughed it off. I thought it was just a phase or a way of joking around, but it didn't fade. It got worse. After a while it felt like I wasn't talking to her anymore. Just this filter of internet phrases and references. If I said something serious, she'd joke it away or twist it into some viral phrase. When I tried to talk about my day, she'd lose interest unless there was something memeable about it. I started calling it brain rot in my head. The way she lived through her phone instead of real life. Every date was a potential video. Every conversation a potential caption. Then came the dogs. Riley's obsessed with dogs, which I thought was sweet at first. She volunteers at a rescue shelter on weekends, and she's genuinely good with them. But lately it's turned into something else. She adopted 2 puppies, both untrained, hyper, and constantly tearing up her apartment. When I'd visit, there'd be pee pads everywhere, toys shredded across the floor, the smell of wet dog in the air. The first time one of them jumped on me and ripped my shirt, she laughed and said, "He's just excited to meet you again." The second time I didn't laugh. I like animals. But Riley treats those dogs like emotional support mascots for her entire personality. Every other sentence is about them. Every time I try to talk about something important, one of the dogs barks and she baby talks them for 5 minutes straight. The last time I was over, I was sitting on her couch trying to tell her about how stressed I was from exams, and she started filming a TikTok of the dogs wearing sunglasses. She didn't even look at me until I stopped talking. I realized in that moment how checked out I was. I've been trying to convince myself I can get past it, that maybe I'm being too uptight or judgmental. But the truth is, I'm just not happy anymore. She's sweet, but everything feels like noise, like we're living in 2 different realities. Me in the present, her in a curated highlight reel. The hard part is, she really likes me. She's told me multiple times that she's never clicked with anyone like this before. And I do care about her, just not in the way she wants. I keep picturing her face when I tell her it's over. The confusion, maybe tears, and I freeze up. She hasn't done anything cruel or toxic. She's not a bad person, she's just lost in a world I can't connect with. We had dinner last weekend, and she spent 10 straight minutes describing a dog influencer that got sponsored by a pet food brand. I just sat there, nodding, realizing I didn't even know how to respond anymore. Later, when she was driving me home, she said, "You're quiet tonight. Everything okay?" I almost told her then. I almost said, "I think we want different things." But I couldn't. She looked so happy, singing along to some silly remix, holding my hand like everything was fine. When I got home, my roommate asked how it went, and all I could say was, "She's great. I just don't think I'm built for this version of her." I've been putting off the breakup for weeks now, telling myself I'll wait until after her midterms, then after her birthday. But the longer I wait, the more trapped I feel. I know there's no good way to end something with someone who doesn't see it coming. But I also know that staying just because I don't want to hurt her is unfair. To both of us. It's not that I need her to be someone she's not. I just need to feel like I'm with a person, not a personality feed. I don't want to be the villain in her story, but I can't keep pretending this is working. Every time my phone buzzes with one of her messages, usually a meme or a video of her dogs, I feel this mix of guilt and exhaustion. I know I need to tell her soon. I've been rehearsing what to say. Something gentle, honest, but not cruel. Something like, "You're amazing." But I don't think we're looking for the same kind of connection. Still, I'm terrified she'll take it as an attack, that she'll think I'm judging her lifestyle or her dogs or her interests. I'm not. I just want real conversations, real quiet moments. Not everything has to be content. Sometimes I miss the early days, those long drives with no music, when she'd tell me about her family or what scared her about the future. That version of Riley felt grounded, but lately, it's like she's always performing for an invisible audience, and I can't keep clapping for something that doesn't feel real anymore. So yeah, I think I know what I need to do. I just wish knowing didn't hurt so much. Update. It's been a few weeks since I first started thinking seriously about breaking up with Riley. And honestly, it's been one of the hardest things I've ever had to process. I keep going over scenarios in my head, imagining how she'll react. And I can't stop second-guessing myself. After our last hangout, I realized just how far apart we've grown. She invited me over to watch a series of TikTok compilations and dog content, as she calls it. I tried to get into it. I really did. But I kept glancing at the clock, feeling this knot in my stomach. The two puppies were running around, chewing on random objects, and Riley kept laughing, filming, and talking over me when I tried to say anything. It hit me that I wasn't present anymore. I was just waiting for the moment I could leave without being rude. After I got home, I called my roommate Kayla and basically vented for 2 hours. I told her that I liked Riley as a person, but this constant brain rot and obsessive focus on her dogs was something I just couldn't handle. Kayla listened and didn't judge. But she asked the question I was scared to face myself. "So are you going to break up with her?" I froze, because yes, I knew I had to, but the thought of actually doing it terrified me. Riley is sweet and she genuinely cares about me. I don't want to crush her, and I don't want to look like some mean or judgmental girlfriend. But I also can't keep pretending I'm happy when every hangout leaves me drained. I started trying to find ways to ease into it, like maybe taking a break, or saying I needed some space to focus on school. But every time I tried, Riley would guilt me a little. "I thought we were close. You're acting distant all of a sudden." It's hard to explain that it's not about distance or feelings. It's about lifestyle and priorities. I just don't connect with her world anymore. Then came a moment last week that really cemented it for me. Riley and I were walking through a park, and one of her dogs got loose. She ran after it, screaming its name. Filming it the whole time, I ran after her, trying to help. But I realized she wasn't thinking about me or even the situation. She was fully in the moment with her dog and the camera. That's when it hit me. She's not compatible with me right now. Not because she's bad or selfish, but because we want fundamentally different things in life. I spent the next day sitting in the library, staring at my laptop, trying to draft what I could say. I know I need to be honest but kind, something like, "I care about you a lot, Riley. But I think we're looking for different kinds of connections. I can't give you what you deserve, and I don't want to hold either of us back." I've been agonizing over the words. I don't want her to feel attacked, and I don't want her to think she's being punished for who she is. I just want to be honest, and I want her to know that this isn't about judgment. It's about compatibility. Every time I think about sending the message or saying it in person, my stomach twists. I keep imagining her face, her tears, her confused voice asking why. And I feel this mix of guilt and fear that maybe I'm being unfair. But then I remember the park, the constant memes, the TikToks, the dogs jumping on me while she films them, and I realize I can't keep going like this. Staying out of fear of hurting her would just hurt both of us in the long run. I know the conversation is coming soon. I just have to find the courage to be firm, but gentle. to give her the respect she deserves while protecting my own boundaries. It's not about rejection, it's about honesty, about making space for both of us to find people who fit our worlds better. It doesn't feel good and I don't expect it to, but deep down, I know it's the right thing to do. Final update. It's been about a month since I finally broke things off with Riley, and I've been sitting on how to explain everything, because it was honestly one of the hardest conversations I've ever had. I kept thinking about the right way to do it, but there isn't one. There's just honesty, and then the aftermath. I invited her over to my apartment one evening. I made sure the setting was calm, just us, some tea, and the dog-free quiet I'd been craving. I started with something simple. Riley, I care about you and I think you're amazing, but I need to be honest about something that's been on my mind. She smiled at first, probably expecting something lighthearted. Then I told her. I explained that the constant memes, the TikTok slang, and the dogs were things I couldn't connect with. I tried to frame it gently. It's not that these things are bad. They're great. You're passionate, you're loving, and you care about animals so much, but it's just not compatible with what I need in a relationship right now. She went quiet for a moment. I could see her processing, her smile fading slowly. Then she asked softly, "So, you just don't like me?" My heart sank. I shook my head. "I like you, I really do. But I realize that I'm not the right person to be in a relationship with you. I can't give you what you deserve, and staying because I'm afraid of hurting you isn't fair to either of us." She didn't cry, which surprised me. Instead, she laughed. A little short, a little sad. "Wow," she said, "I didn't see that coming." We sat there for a while, just talking. She asked questions, not accusatory, just curious. I answered as honestly as I could without making her feel like she had to change. I told her this wasn't about her being too much or wrong, just that our worlds didn't line up. She nodded slowly, saying she understood, even though I could tell it hurt. After a while, the tension broke a little. She joked about one of the puppies and how they'd miss me coming over, and I laughed genuinely for the first time in weeks. It was bittersweet, but it was the kind of closure I needed, not dramatics. Not guilt, just honesty and respect. She left that night quietly. We hugged. She whispered, "Thanks for being honest. I guess this is better than dragging it out." And she walked away. The next few days were weirdly peaceful. No texts, no calls, no memes, just space to think and breathe. I kept reflecting on the relationship and realized something important. I had felt guilty for months, worried that I was being selfish for needing compatibility and real connection. But I wasn't. Wanting a relationship that fits who I am doesn't make me a bad person. It makes me self-aware. I've reconnected with some of my old friends and have started spending time on my own hobbies again. I'm reading more, going on long walks, and even volunteering at an animal shelter, but only in ways I can manage. Without feeling overwhelmed, I still like dogs, just not in a way that takes over my entire life. Occasionally, I think about Riley. I hope she's doing well, thriving with her dogs, making videos, living her life fully. I hope she finds someone who matches her energy and her version of fun because she deserves that. And me? I feel lighter. I'm not sad, I'm not lonely, I'm just me, free to think, free to laugh, free to live without constantly feeling like I have to adjust myself for someone else. This whole experience taught me something crucial. Relationships aren't just about liking someone. They're about connecting in a way that feels natural and sustainable. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for someone is let them go, so you can both grow in your own directions. Breaking up with Riley was hard, but staying would have been harder, and now, I finally feel like I can breathe again.